Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if female Deku had a phoenix quirk and rebirth? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. 2 more years pass following the Monkalama incident, as the battle with Muscular was dubbed, and Izuka and Katsuki were prepared to enter the U.Hero program. The past 2 years had been hectic, with Katsuki upping his training to insane levels and taking part in All Might's super muscle training, while Izuka trained her quirks and took part in numerous junior internships with many different heroes and agencies. In the aftermath of the Monkalama incident, Izuka ended up in the national news for her actions in saving Waterhose and being instrumental in the defeat of Muscular. When people got wind that she was the same girl as the All for One kidnappings, the story went from a local story to one that covered Japan. People began to recognize her in the streets, and many said they'd be cheering for her in the future. The Mari Town police force had given her an award for her heroism, and the Japanese government had ratified it by extending Izuka the Medal of Peace, the award for civilian heroism. Such an award had always come with a recommendation to every hero school in the country, so Izuka was finally able to publicly acknowledge that she was going to UA on a recommendation. She just couldn't say that she'd technically had that recommendation for 3 years already. Nizu had only continued to tutor her for another year, until she was 14. He had stopped when Izuka had passed a prospective college entrance exam that Nizu had gotten from a friend. If Izuka wanted, she could go to Tokyo University when she graduated, though admittedly, her scores were average for a successful applicant, but considering she was 14 and not 18/19, it was an amazing feat. Instead of tutoring, Nizu set her a series of revision books so she could maintain her intelligence until she started her U.A schooling. With all the extra time this gave her, Izuka threw herself into quirk training, medical training, and finding a creative outlet, something that Dr. Miragi had highly recommended to her during their now quarterly sessions. Izuka and Katsuki tried numerous different creative outlets together: singing, instruments, poetry, sculpting, drawing, painting, and even dancing. Katsuki had been awful at singing anything but heavy metal, and his drawing, painting, dancing, and poetry skills were all very average for a teenager, but to Izuka's surprise, Katsuki was insanely good at sculpting and playing the drums. Izuka had a little figurine of All Might in his civilian form that Katsuki had made for her, and it was extremely well done and made like an action figure, using proper modeler's paint and plastics. Katsuki had even made a couple of figures of Izuka herself, one that he sent to Koda for the boy's 5th birthday. Koda couldn't understand why Izuka didn't already have her own merchandise, and one that he secretly kept to himself. Izuka, on the other hand, had proven to be more skilled at singing, dancing, and drawing. She could hold a tune quite well, and her combat training and agility made dancing a fun experience, but it was drawing she really excelled at. Her notebooks were no longer filled with childish doodles of heroes, but well-done sketches of their profiles and even some action poses that wonderfully captured the hero's fighting style. In quirk training, Izuka had advanced a lot, having gained control of her flames and won for all that she hadn't imagined was possible. Even her link quirk had been practiced with Recovery Girl, and Izuka discovered she could re-establish any link she'd made with a person without actually having to touch them again, though it seemed that unlike the direct method, the recipient of the link could rebuff her, which resulted in a nosebleed and a crippling migraine for the poor girl. She'd learned that the strong way when she tried to reopen a link with Tamura or Kurogiri, in hopes of finding them for the heroes. At least Taka and Kanako had been happy to hear from her directly again. Izuka went to see them once a year since the incident, spending a week of her summer break with them as hero experience. As for One for All and her flames, Izuka could now create hotter flames and concentrate them, controlling them more efficiently, such as creating blue fire or forming a blowtorch-like flame on the end of her finger. With One for All, Izuka's training had been hellish. For 3 months, she couldn't use it without breaking something and having to heal it, but thankfully, Izuka's own evolution ability did affect the damage she did, and her bones slowly became harder to break, and her muscles tore less often. By her 14th birthday, Izuka was able to use 100% of One for All without immediately breaking something, but the incredible pain caused by the resultant muscle cramps were so bad that she could only throw a second punch or kick with extreme amounts of willpower. To compensate for this, Izuka developed the Phoenix Shroud technique, a method by which she maintained 20% of one for all within her body and a shroud of flames to supplement her power and boost it like a rocket engine. She had also created a second version, Phoenix Sacrifice, which she was forbidden to use unless someone would die without it. It was the same as Phoenix Shroud, but used 100% of her power and replaced the booster flames with healing ones to help maintain her body for longer. The one time she'd used it for training, Izuka had killed herself from a combination of BLD loss and shock due to the pain she put herself through. That had resulted in the one and only time that Izuka had ever been grounded, and the scolding she'd gotten had made her ears ring. By the time that the spring of her 15th year came along, Izuka was certain that she'd be ready for the challenges of UA. The day of the UA entrance exams finally came, and the residents of the Yagi Midoriya household were excitedly preparing. The Bakugas had come to stay the previous night so they could spend the next day with the Yagi Midoriyas, since their home was closer to UA than theirs. Katsuki and Izuka were doing the last of their workout in the gym, both having worked up a sweat when All Might walked in. "Good morning, young Izuka and Katsuki. Are you both prepared for today?" he asked with a smile. All Might had taken a teaching post at UA so he could continue to watch over his child's progress, as well as the progress of the next generation of great heroes. "We're ready. We're gonna kick butt?" Katsuki grinned, punching the sandbag with a bit more gusto. "Honestly, you two make it sound like I'm participating." Izuka giggled, running on the treadmill. "You kind of are, dear." Toshi smiled. "Not as an examinee," the girl hopped of the machine. "I'm helping Recovery Girl cover the event. There are gonna be 7 testing areas with at least 30 examinees each. Recovery Girl is covering Delta, Epsilon, Zeta and Eta, while I'm taking watching over Alpha, Beta and Gamma." "True, but even though you'll be in the monitor room with the teachers, your actions while seeing to the injuries will still be scrutinized," Toshi explained, before turning to Katsuki. "Are you sure you want to take part? You've more than earned a recommendation if you want it." "F that All Might." Katsuki scowled. "I'm getting in by skill alone. I'm gonna start my road to number 1 by getting the number 1 score." All Might inflated into his hero form. "You move me with your enthusiasm. Here's a little goal for you. My own score in the entrance exams was 94, and that was the highest score in UA history. No one has beaten my record, so if you do, I guarantee you'll be entering UA with the full attention of every teacher and student. A great way to begin the road to number 1. Katsuki's smirk grew wider. "Oh hell yeah. I'm gonna beat your score and get over 100 points. Izuka giggled. "Want to make a bet?" she asked, making Katsuki turn to her with a feral grin. Nothing made Katsuki work harder than when he wanted to surpass Izuka's expectations, and Izuka knew it. "If you not only beat All Might's score, but also get over 100 points, then when our hero team becomes number 1, I'll let you have top billing and be in charge. But if you don't," the obvious alternative hung in the air, and Katsuki punched his own palm, making a small explosion as he did. "You are on," he shouted, roughly shaking Izuka's offered hand. Tashinori chuckled to himself at the strange relationship that the two had. To say it was complex was an understatement. The two were simultaneously boyfriend and girlfriend, best friends, rivals and partners. Katsuki was undoubtedly the DM&T1 in the relationship, with him deciding what they did, though he usually chose to do something they'd both like and tended to prioritize Izuka's enjoyment over his own. But on the occasions that Izuka really put her foot down, Katsuki would stop and listen. The boy knew Izuka's strength and respected it, along with her indomitable will, which was probably why she was the only girl he could even consider being with. She'd earned his respect and was strong enough to walk beside him, not behind him like some extra. Not only that, but despite knowing that if it ever came down to a no-holds-barred battle between the two, Izuka would come out on top, she never looked down on him and always looked at him with awe, respect, and genuine affection. On Izuka's side of things, Katsuki was someone she'd always looked up to and cared about, the only one her age that didn't think of her as just some weird nerdy girl. Her being quirkless had thrown a wrench in that, until she had saved him from Kurogyri and opened his eyes. Once Katsuki realized it was actions and not quirks that made one a hero, he re-examined his time with the girl and came to the conclusion that she had been a hero, leading to him finally acknowledging her and fulfilling one of Izuka's dreams. Izuka dearly loved him for giving up his pride and admitting he was wrong, and finally believing in her. He even made room in his dream for her, and so Izuka had repaid him by giving him all the love she could. Toshinori was snapped from his thoughts by the arrival of Inko. "Izuka dear, I just got off the phone with Principal Nizu. Since the entrance exams are this afternoon, he's asking all the recommendation students to come and see him in his office this morning for meet and greet." "Really? That's cool, I'll get to meet the other recommendation guys." Izuka grinned. "Do I have time for breakfast and a shower?" Inko nodded. "Of course, you have a couple of hours still." "Katsuki, I'm cooking up your favorite, spicy waffles. Goddamn, I love you Midoriya women. I'm gonna take a shower and be right down," Katsuki said, running off to wash up. Izuka followed closely behind and went to her own bathroom to shower and dress. As she finished washing up, Izuka changed into a white skirt and pale pink t-shirt, as well as her signature big red shoes before tying her hair into a ponytail. She'd grown again in the last 2 years and was now only an inch or so shorter than her mother. Her womanly proportions hadn't changed much, only growing at the same rate as her height, resulting in her keeping the same cute and slender frame as she had when she was it suited her, and Kaken never complained, not that he'd seen her in anything more revealing than a one-piece swimsuit, so Izuka was happy with it. Now dressed, she joined the others at the breakfast table, where Kaken was already tearing through waffles like it would be his last meal. That boy really liked spicy food. Mitsuki and Masaru smiled and greeted her as she sat down. "So, what are you guys going to be doing while we're out?" Izuka asked, sipping on some sweet tea. "I'll be in the monitor room with you," Toshinori said. "Your mom and I are going shopping." Mitsuki grinned with Inko nodded beside her. Masaru smiled at his wife's happiness. "I'm having a lazy day. Work let me have today off because of Katsuki's exam, so I'm relaxing." Izuka giggled. "Good for you. What about you, Kaken? What will you do before the exam?" "I'm meeting some guys from middle school. They're like the only people I can stand in that shitty place, so I figured I'd bless 'em with my presence for a couple of hours," Kaken said between bites of waffle. Izuka's sweat dropped. That was her boyfriend, humble as always. Once they'd finished breakfast and Izuka had helped her mother with the dishes, Izuka and Toshinori drove to Utoday. With Izuka entering for the last time with her childhood ID, Toshinori walked her to Nizu's office, before running off to join the other teachers in preparing for the exam. Knocking on the door, she heard Nizu's voice inviting her in, so she walked in, discovering she was the last one to arrive. Nizu was at his desk, Aizawa on his left and BLD King on his right. 4 other students were already stood waiting, each with a unique and interesting look to them. The most normal-looking one was a tall, busty girl with black hair, tied up in a ponytail. Next to her was a boy with dual-colored hair and eyes. His left side was red-haired with a blue eye, while his right was white-haired with a gray eye. He had a serious expression, and a rather large burn scar that covered much of the left side of his face, including his eye. Then there was the other boy, fairly tall with pale skin, ash-blonde-colored hair and a skull-like face with no visible lips, leaving his teeth on full display. His nose was also fairly small with large nostrils, making it appear almost like he had no nose at all. The last student was a girl with very long hair that was comprised entirely of vines with faint green thorns covering them. The 4 students looked at Izuka, studying her just as she studied them. The black-haired girl appeared to recognize her, as her eyes widened a bit, but the others looked at her like a stranger. Skullboy waved and Vine Girl smiled kindly and bowed, which Izuka returned. Dual-colored boy raised an eyebrow at her, before turning back to the teachers. "Now that you are all here, we can get underway." Nizu grinned. "You dad was late getting out of the house again, right?" Aizawa asked Izuka with an annoyed look. "Yes, sensei, I'm sorry." Izuka bowed in apology. "Nah, forget it. Tell your dad that I'll be having words with him though," the tired man said, a hint of steel in his tone. The 5 students gulped. Aizawa-sensei was not one to upset. Nizu just smiled and pulled out some papers. "I've called you here for a few reasons." First is to introduce you to each other and inform you of whose class you'll be in. Secondly, to let you know about some of the expectations we here at UDA have for our recommendation students. Thirdly, well, we'll get to that. Now, if you'll be so kind, introduce yourselves and tell us some things about yourself. Midoriya, why don't you start us off? Izuka nodded, though she felt a bit strange being called Midoriya by the mouse hero. All the UDA teachers had called her Izuka, but she supposed it would seem inappropriate now. My name is Izuka Midoriya. My quirk is Omniflame, which allows me to conjure and control flames, summon wings of fire for flying, heal myself and others, as well as improving my strength. I hope we can all get along, she introduced, bowing politely to the other students. She had used the alias of her quirk, since Phoenix was a bit too on the nose. Ah, would you happen to be the same Midoriya from the Monkalama incident and all for one kidnappings? The black-haired girl asked. Izuka smiled and nodded. Amazing! I saw you on the news and watched the award ceremony for the Medal of Peace. I'm happy to meet you, she said, before turning to everyone else. My name is Momo Yaoyorozu and my quirk is creation. It lets me create anything so long as I understand the structure. Dual color was next. I am Shoto Todoroki. My quirk makes ice, he said in a monotone. When it became apparent that Todoroki wouldn't say more, the skull boy introduced himself. Hi, I'm Juzo Hananuki. My quirk is softening, and I bet you can guess what it does. I'm looking forward to working with you. Last was the vine girl. My name is Ibara Shiozaki. My quirk is named Vines and allows me to control the vines I grow from my head. It is my longing to spread good across the world. I hope we can work together for this goal. Izuka smiled and nodded. These four seemed to be interesting and had some powerful quirks. They'd all make great heroes. Nizu seemed pleased with their introductions. Good, you've been acquainted. Now, I'll reveal your classes. Normally, we split the recommendation kids between Class 1A and Class 1B, but since we have an uneven number, 2 of you will go with Kan-sensei and the other 3 will go with Aizawa-sensei. Shiozaki, Hananuki, you 2 will be under the care of Sekijiro Kan aka BLD King. You are Class 1B. BLD King grinned at the 2. I hope you make me proud. Class 1B usually gets overlooked because of 1A, but you'll always have me in your corner, so work strong. Yes, sensei, the 2 students said, happy to be in BLD King's class. Naturally, Todoroki, Yaoyorozu and Midoriya will be in Class 1A, under Shota Aizawa aka Eraserhead. Nizu continued. Aizawa regarded his students with a critical eye, particularly Todoroki and Yaoyorozu. I'm a strong man to impress, and recommendation or not, I won't hesitate to expel you if I feel like you're wasting my time. Still, you're my students now, so if you work strong and prove yourselves, then I'll take care of you. Nizu, perhaps wanting to add to the pressure, piped up. Incidentally, Aizawa-sensei has expelled 80% of all his students, with most being gone within the first month of school. Also, Midoriya. Izuka gulped as focus was put on her. You are the first student that Aizawa-sensei has ever actually requested to be in his class. The girl blinked. Aizawa had asked for her specifically? She couldn't help but blush and feel a little proud of that fact. Nizu didn't feel the need to mention that Kan-sensei had asked for her too. Aizawa-sensei only won out because he knew her already and had never asked for anyone before. The underground hero sent a withering glare at the principal as the other students looked at Izuka questioningly. Don't get a big head over it, Midoriya. Aizawa said evenly, I know your power, and I know what your dad did with the same sort of power. I want you in my class so I can keep an eye on you. Ken would just coddle you. Who exactly is your father? Todoroki asked, the slightest bit of emotion finally sneaking into his voice. Oh, you wouldn't know him. His name is Toshi Midoriya, Izuka said, using the alias All Might had given her for this kind of occasion. He works as a personal trainer and fitness instructor. He's trained a fair few pro heroes, she added, mixing in some of her pride for All Might into her tone. Todoroki made a noise of acknowledgement, but his interest had apparently ended, so they all turned back to Nizu. Our expectations are tough, but fair. We expect you to act as examples to your peers across all the different courses, not just heroes. Your grades must remain in the top 25%, And your behavior must be exemplary, or we may decide to revoke your recommendation. In that event, you'll have to take a special exam to keep your position in the hero course. Failure to do so will result in your expulsion from the hero program, which in itself does not mean you can automatically enter general education, support, or management. We teachers are very invested in our students, especially those that have already proven themselves, so please, do not disappoint us. The 5 recommendation students nodded and bowed. None wanted to disappoint the man, or mouse, dog, bear thing. Nizu clapped happily. Excellent. A good, respectful attitude. But of course, just as you have additional responsibilities, you also have additional privileges. Your hero costume and support item budget is higher than a normal student by about 50%. You also have access to Gym Beta and Training Ground Delta whenever they are not in use. Lastly, in the case of an emergency, you have the authority to act and take command of other students if need be. Izuka smiled a bit. With the extra money for her hero budget, she could get more of the support items she wanted to help balance her out, as well as the things that would help her support Kaken better. The two had a basic plan for their future agency. Kaken takes on combat situations while Izuka takes on rescue operations, and between the two of them, they would be prepared for anything, theoretically. Now, there is about an hour before the entrance exams start with the written test, then after that, we'll be having the practical exam. You are welcome to watch from the observation lounge. Nizu offered, handing each of them their student IDs. Izuka accepted hers with a bright smile. Midoriya, recovery girl, is waiting in the monitor room. Yaoyorozu raised an eyebrow as the 5 of them were dismissed. Midoriya, if you don't mind me asking, why would recovery girl be waiting for you? Are you injured? Izuka smiled at her. I'm fine, I'm just helping out with the exam. Because part of my quirk is healing, I'm apprenticed under recovery girl and she's letting me act as the medic for the first 3 training grounds for the test, she explained, conjuring a bit of pink flame. By the way, feel free to call me Izuka. I see. Thank you, Izuka. Please call me Momo. My last name is a bit of a mouthful, Momo said with a hint of a blush. She appeared happy to be making a friend. Thanks, Momo. I'm actually a little bit surprised you recognized me, even before my name was said. I have kind of a plain face, so most people don't know who I am unless I introduce myself. Izuka asked. Momo blushed a bit more. It's a bit complicated. When you were rescued, I was attending an all-girls prep school, and when we heard you were going to be getting a top private education instead of returning to your old school, a lot of us assumed you'd be coming to our school, being a girl and all. After those rumors got started, I became a bit interested in you. After all, you saved All Might's life. Hey, he saved me first. To be honest, I don't remember it very well. I just sort of acted, I suppose. Momo nodded. That sounds like the response of a hero. You became something of a role model at my school for a while, especially after the Monkalama incident. You were even mentioned in our headmistress's speech on influential women in heroism. Are really? Wow, don't take this the wrong way, but I'm kind of glad I didn't go to your. I'd never be able to show my face after that. Izuka mumbled, turning cherry red just from the idea. You don't like the attention and adoration? The older girl asked. No, I just want to help people. As long as I can save lives, I don't mind if everyone just thinks of me as a normal person. I sort of prefer it, though having a fan or two is nice. Izuka thought back to how happy Kota was, and how glad he always looks when she comes to visit. Momo tilted her head. Izuka wasn't what Momo was expecting. She had expected a very level-headed, proud and strong-willed young woman, sure of herself and acting almost like a female All Might. Instead, the girl was timid, very polite, modest and passionate about helping others. Momo decided she preferred this timid girl over the version she'd built in her own head. I'm glad. If you like, you can call me if you ever want help with studying or anything. Izuka's face lit up. She'd never had a female friend her own age before. Yes, that'll be great. Here's my number. She got out her phone and the two girls exchanged numbers. Momo giggled at the chibi All Might charm hanging off Izuka's phone. Then she noticed the address she'd been given along with the phone. Wait, you live in Nebo Ward? I do too. Momo grinned. That's awesome. I've sort of never had a female friend before. Is it okay if I call you my friend? Izuka asked shyly. Momo felt her heart flutter. This girl was just so cute. She was overcome with the longing to protect the fluffy-haired girl. Of course. You can even call me Big Sister if you like. Momo laughed, only half joking. Izuka giggled. I'm not brave enough to do that, but thank you anyway. I need to get going, but I'll see you later. And with that, Izuka happily ran off to meet with Recovery Girl, glad to have made a female friend. Momo watched her go with a small smile, secretly glad that she too had made her first true female friend. Around the corner, Todoroki frowned. He'd wanted to ask Midoriya about All Might, but he'd have more than enough chances. She was his logical opposite, as the girl was fire while he was ice. If she also maintained a connection to All Might, then surpassing her would truly be a way of proving that he was able to become number one without his father's influence. He was already angry that he couldn't take part in the real entrance exam because of his father's recommendation. Shoto wanted no shortcuts, especially from that man. When Izuka reached the monitor room, she found almost all the U.A staff present. Only BLD King hadn't shown up yet, as he was getting to know his new students. Recovery Girl waved Izuka over to her. These are the maps for training grounds Alpha, Beta and Gamma. Do your best to memorize them so you can move around easily and find patients. Izuka nodded and looked at the screen, scanning them rapidly and committing as much to memory as possible. Training Ground Alpha was a simulated village, not unlike Monkalama. Beta was an urban area, more in line with modern cities. Gamma was an industrial area filled with factories and maze-like pipes. As soon as she was finished, Recovery Girl handed her a checklist containing the names and pictures of every examinee in her test areas, as well as an earpiece so the monitor room could communicate with her and tell her of injuries. All right, Midoriya, you've been told the rules for this, but I'm giving you a refresher. Recovery Girl said, raising a finger with each rule she stated. Do not interfere with the exam unless it is to save a life. Do not perform any healing on a patient that has not retired from the exam, unless it is an emergency. Any injury you cannot heal, bring the patient to me immediately and call the paramedics. If you believe a patient is too injured to continue, but refuses to retire, contact the monitor room for confirmation. Finally, you are technically U.A staff for this event. If you feel a person is a danger to themselves or others, or you have any concerns about an applicant, you have an obligation to report it to us, even if you feel they are good people or you feel bad for them. Yes, ma'am, Izuka said, putting her earpiece in. With that said, Izuka waited around the monitor room for the exams to begin, chatting with some of the other observers. Once BLD King finally showed up, every U.A staff member was present, as well as a trio of representatives from the Japanese government, the Hero Public Safety Commission, commonly called the Hero Union, and the police force. The written test came and went fairly quickly, with Izuka spotting Katsuki on the cameras, writing away without a care in the world. Izuka was certain he'd ace the test, so instead focused on preparing for the physical exam. She changed into some U.A gym clothes and headed out, flying to Training Ground Alpha. As she waited for the exam to begin, she flicked through the checklist she'd been given and smiled when she saw Katsuki's name and picture among the examinees of Training Ground Gamma. An exam revolving around destroying robots would be easy for Kaken. Outside Training Ground Gamma, Katsuki was performing some last-minute stretches, partly to limber himself up and partly to work up a bit of a sweat, which would improve his quirk. He looked around, mostly unimpressed with the other applicants. There were a few strong-looking people like a buff dude chomping on sugar cubes and a hairy beast guy with glasses, but for the most part, they were all extras. TCH, no DMN challenge. At least that bet is as good as mine, he smirked, unknowingly scaring some of the other examinees. And start, declared Present Mike. Without missing a beat, Katsuki burst through the crowd and into the training ground proper. It didn't take long for him to find his first robot, a weak one-pointer, which he promptly turned into shrapnel with an explosion. For most of the next 10 minutes, Katsuki enjoyed himself as he ran wild, blasting apart robots with impunity. Occasionally, he'd notice Izuka flying around above, scanning the area for injuries, but he'd resisted the urge to call out to her or get her attention. There'd be time for that later, when he was claiming his prize in the bet. There was only 3 minutes of the original 10 left, and the explosive boy had racked up 77 points. At roughly 10 points a minute, if he kept up the pace he'd win the bet by the end. Then he hesitated. Some idiot was catching his breath against one of the walls, with a damaged pipe dangling loosely above him. The oblivious fool didn't even notice, not even when the pipe suddenly gave way and fell. Motherfucker! Katsuki cursed, rocketing towards the boy and pulling him out of danger in the nick of time. Thank you, the idiot stuttered, but Katsuki was in no mood for that shit. Shut up and F off. Pay attention if you don't want to die, he roared as he ran off for more points. Unfortunately, stupidity was apparently common in Katsuki's group, as every time he managed to smash another bot, he'd spot some dumbass about to get creamed, forcing him to come flying and swearing to the rescue. Katsuki's ambitions kept screaming at him to just let the idiots get what was coming to them, but his annoying conscience just whispered that it was the right thing to do, that it would make Izuka happy and reduce her workload. If these idiots got badly hurt, she'd blame herself like the little martyr she was, or use too much of her own BLD for healing and get herself hospitalized or killed from BLD loss. So Katsuki said if people needed saving, he had no choice. It was better that than watching his girlfriend being genuinely upset. The test is over, screamed present Mike. F-. Katsuki screamed even louder, startling everyone in the training grounds. He'd scored 90 points, but that wasn't enough to beat All Might's score or win the bet. With a furious glare at some of the idiots he'd saved, Katsuki marched off to change. As for Izuka, her first real experience as a medic in a combat situation proved to be just as chaotic, but a fair bit more successful. The moment present Mike began the test, she'd carefully patrolled the skies, keeping her eyes peeled for injuries or people in danger. Occasionally, she'd spot someone and fly closer to see them, before flying off again as they continued to participate. Over the course of the exam, she healed 7 people in ground alpha, 12 in ground beta and only 3 in ground gamma, which was odd. She was sure the more industrial area would have the most injuries. The last person she'd healed had been a boy in ground beta, and that had led to an interesting encounter. The boy was sat up against a wall, his breathing heavy as his ribs were broken, and he had a rather deep cut across his. Izuka had spotted him the moment he'd been wounded, and when she flew down, he had choked out that he was retiring, allowing her to treat him, though she'd have forced the issue if he hadn't. Just as she was applying her flames to the area, a stern voice had called out to her. "You there, what are you doing?" said a tall, dark blue-haired boy in glasses. "Are you attacking another examinee? That is shameful." And no, the injured boy tried to defend her, but he began coughing horribly, forcing Izuka to intensify her healing. "I'm not an examinee, I'm the medic for this area. This person was badly hurt and has retired, so I'm administering treatment. Please return to your exam, you can still get more points," Izuka said, trying to smile earnestly despite being a little upset at the accusation. The glasses boy spluttered, his face turning red as he tried and failed to properly apologize. Before he could get the words out, there was a distant rumbling and a horde of examinees came running past, screaming. "It's the 0-pointer. It's freaking huge. No way, there's no way we can beat that thing. But wait, what about that girl?" Izuka's ears twitched and she looked up sharply. Another fleeing student screamed back at the last one, "We can't do anything. She's too close and we can't stop that thing." "Oh no," Izuka muttered, paling. Quickly ensuring her current patient was in no danger, Izuka helped him to his feet and handed him to the glasses boy. "Please take him to the entrance." "I'll see to this," she declared. "Wait, what are you?" The boy was cut off by Izuka taking flight, leaving him and the injured boy on the ground. Izuka flew up high and immediately spotted the 0-pointer. It was gargantuan, meaning it was kind of strong not to see it. At its feet, just a few of its monstrous steps away, was a girl trapped under rubble and desperately trying to escape. The 0-pointer is huge. Probably weighs a few tons. Should I go full power and risk injury, or gamble that a weaker blow is enough? Izuka thought. The robot would definitely kill the trapped girl if it stepped on her, so Izuka was mandated to interfere and protect her. Deciding on the strongest, safe attack she had, Izuka flew in a loop, coating her body in flame and charging her legs with the combined power of blue flame and 20% of one for all. Once she'd built up momentum, she flew at the robot and performed a flying kick. Phoenix Talon, she shouted, driving her foot into the robot's head. The metal crumpled like wet tissue beneath the force of her blow, and Izuka found herself traveling right through the thing's head, leaving a smoldering hole that dripped molten metal like BLD from a wound. The force of the kick, combined with the loss of its processors, caused the robot to crumple backward to the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust that had the trapped girl coughing, but ultimately safe. Izuka breathed a sigh of relief as she landed, flinching a bit as her leg touched the ground. That's what I get for using 20% without warming up, she muttered, gingerly rubbing at the cramping muscles. As normal feeling returned to the limb, Izuka ran over to the trapped girl. It's okay, just hold on, all right? Why yes, the girl replied nervously as Izuka activated one for all again. As gently as she could, Izuka lifted the rubble on the girl's ankle, careful not to hurt her as she tossed the offending slab of concrete away. Thank you, the girl said, pulling herself into a seated position. Izuka looked at the girl's ankle. It was bruised, but didn't appear broken and only a few scrapes were bleeding. Just relax for a moment. I need to heal your ankle, Izuka explained, conjuring her flames and pressing them into the examinee's injured leg. The girl hissed and winced. The flames themselves didn't hurt, but contact with the damaged area did, but looked amazed as her ankle was left in pristine condition. Now that she was healed, Izuka took a closer look at the girl herself. She was very cute, a little taller than Izuka with big brown eyes, soft round cheeks and brown hair styled into a shoulder-length bob cut, with two long bangs that framed her face. Izuka also noticed small pads on the tips of each of the girl's fingers. Looking up at Izuka with a happy expression, the girl smiled brightly. Thanks so much. I'd have been toast without you. My name is Ochako Uraraka. Nice to meet you. Ah, you're welcome. It was no trouble. We all want to be heroes after all. My name is Izuka Midoriya. Nice to meet you too. Izuka replied. Ochako's cheerful nature was infectious. Present Mike announced the end of the exam moments later. Recovery Girl spoke to Izuka over her earpiece, stating that there were no new injuries to treat, so everyone from each training ground was in peak condition, with the exception of the boy Izuka had entrusted to the glasses guy. Apparently the poor guy's broken ribs were worsened by the sudden evacuation, but Recovery Girl assured Izuka that she'd done the right thing. You were pretty amazing against the 0-pointer. Did you get a lot of points against the others? Ochako asked as she hopped up to stand beside Izuka. Oh no, I didn't. That 0-pointer was the only one I destroyed, but don't worry, I'm a recommendation student. I was only here to help Recovery Girl with healing thanks to my quirk. Izuka explained. Ochako's eyes widened. Amazing. I'm kind of jealous. Hey, do you want to be friends? Izuka blushed. Really? That'd be nice. Here, she handed Ochako her phone number. Call me later so I have yours too, okay? I hope we end up in the same class, she said, running off to meet with Katsuki and hide her blushing face. As she ran, she couldn't help but think, I made 2 female friends in one day. A cute one and a appealing one. I got lucky, she giggled to herself. Izuka returned to the monitor room and looked at the scoreboard for the examinees as Nizu, Aizawa and Ken debated how to split the passing students up. Only the top 10 were listed on the scoreboard, and Izuka smiled brightly when she saw both Katsuki and Ochako on the list. Ochako was at 3rd place, but she only had 28 points. Izuka looked across the board and noticed an additional score, rescue points. So there was another element. I kind of expected something like that. She muttered. Ochako had 45 rescue points, giving her a combined score of 73 points. Katsuki was in 1st place and had 90 villain points alone, but what was really surprising was the 30 rescue points he'd earned. Kaken got 120 points. He beat All Might's score. At that moment, Toshi came over. I know. I'm both proud and a little bit frustrated. The top 35 students will all be accepted and combined with the 5 recommendation students to create 2 classes of 20 students. Also, we all saw you working out there. Toshi grinned. That thing with young Uraraka and the 0-pointer would have gotten you 60 rescue points if you'd been an examinee. Combined with other rescue points from the others you'd helped, you'd have gotten an even 100 points if you were a participant, beating my score and getting second place. Izuka smiled widely. It may be unofficial since she wasn't an actual examinee, but it still made her happy that if she'd taken the exam, she'd have passed just by doing what came naturally. At that moment, the trio from the government, police, and hero union came over, nodding to All Might and turning to Izuka herself. Miss Midoriya, we wanted to ask your opinion on a participant, the lady from the hero union said. Mr. Tenya Ida earned 6th place with 52 villain points and 9 rescue points for a combined 61 points. However, after seeing his interaction with you as you healed that other boy, we are having some doubts about him. What do you think of him? The police officer asked. I think he deserves his place in UA, Izuka said evenly, trying to keep her nerves out of her voice. He was kind of rash, but I think he's just very earnest. From his point of view, I was another examinee that was potentially hurting someone. My pink flames, despite their color, do look dangerous, and because I have to physically touch the wound, it often looks like I'm causing the patient pain. If anything, I think it was admirable that he stopped his own test to potentially protect another student, even if he was mistaken. Plus, when I explained myself, he seemed genuinely apologetic, though the 0-pointer stopped him from having a chance to apologize. He did also do as I asked and took the injured person out of the area. The government representative noted her response and smiled, a well-thought-out analysis. I happen to agree with you. Mr. Ida will naturally be accepted into the hero program. The hero union lady and police officer nodded in agreement. Thank you for your input, Miss Midoriya. Naturally, we will all be watching your growing career with interest. Work strong, Miss Midoriya, the lady said as the trio went back to their earlier discussions. After that, Izuka went to meet Katsuki outside the school, eagerly waiting to congratulate him. She knew he wouldn't know about the rescue points, but she also knew that Tashinori expected her to tell him and hadn't forbidden her from it. Izuka giggled a bit when she saw the irritated-looking boy approaching her. I lost the DMN bet, he frowned. He might have been a bit of a sore loser, but Kaken was never one to refuse to accept his losses. Izuka burst into laughter, making Katsuki growl. Why is that so dim and funny, Deku? Because of a bunch of idiots that nearly got themselves FING killed, I missed out on beating All Might's score by just 4 FING points. With another 10, I'd have won the bet. Izuka smiled and took his face into her hands, gently embracing him. I'm laughing, Lil Baku, because I know a little secret. Villain points only made up half the score. The other half was rescue points. What? Katsuki screamed. What did I get? 30 rescue points. You scored 120 total. You beat All Might and won the bet? Kaken paused for a moment, his face blank as he tried to really digest what he'd just been told. Then he suddenly roared with joy and grabbed Izuka, spinning her around in his arms as she giggled. When he finally put her down, he embraced her hungrily, practically attacking her lips. It was the only non-chaste embrace they'd ever shared. Katsuki was surprisingly respectful of letting Izuka set the pace, usually. By the time it was done, Izuka was left blushing and breathless, making Katsuki smirk, distracting from his own blush. That was my first prize, he said cockily, daring Izuka to argue. Idiot. Izuka murmured embarrassedly. That embrace had been a bit intense for the timid girl, but she couldn't deny it made her happy. The two walked home together, hand in hand, and Katsuki listened as Izuka told him about the recommendation kids and her 2 new friends, Momo and Ochako. Katsuki wasn't too interested outside of being happy that his girl had other girls to do girly shit with, but he was happiest that it hadn't been boys she'd made friends with. It was inevitable that Izuka would befriend boys, especially with them going to be in her class, and while Katsuki couldn't stop it, nor should he secretly told himself, it didn't mean he had to like it. And so, Izuka Midoriya and Katsuki Bakogu were both accepted into the U.A-Hero program. The real road to being a hero starts here. The week before school officially started, Izuka and Katsuki trained as usual, both more fired up than ever thanks to making it in and also being in the same class together. Class 1A Izuka had spoken with Ochako and Momo over the phone and was happy to discover that Ochako too was in 1A, meaning that all three of Izuka's friends would be in her class, and their homeroom teacher would be Aizawa-sensei, one of the teachers she knew best since he had always supervised her junior internships. On the morning of their first day, Izuka and Katsuki were dressed in their new uniforms, smiling proudly as their mothers took pictures and their fathers gave words of encouragement. "Don't forget, I'll be a teacher too. I can't give you any special treatment though, so behave yourselves." Toshinori grinned, entering all-might mode to punctuate his point. "Katsuki, keep a close eye on Izuka and be sure to try and keep your temper. Don't blow up your classmates," Masaru told him, only half joking. Mitsuki stopped taking photos and ruffled her son's hair. "You may be an annoying brat, but I'm proud of you," she said in a rare moment of softness. She also embraced Izuka's cheek. "Don't let this idiot boss you about just because he won that bet, and kick his butt if he starts getting cocky." Inko hugged Katsuki. "Be good, Katsuki," she told him, before hugging her daughter much more gently, but with a reluctance, like she didn't want Izuka to go. "You make me so proud, my dear. You guys both look really cool, like real heroes." The two teens grinned, with Izuka getting choked up and even Katsuki feeling a bit teary-eyed. "We'll do our best. See you tonight." Izuka smiled brightly as Katsuki turned to leave before the mushy stuff got to him. The two walked to Yude in companionable silence, excitement and nerves building with every step. When they arrived, they searched for their classroom, finding it quickly and pausing at the door. "This is it, we'll be alongside the next generation of heroes," Izuka gushed. "Yeah, make friends with them if you want, but remember that the two of us are gonna be number one. Don't get distracted," Katsuki told her. Unlike Izuka, he'd never had a longing for friends, he just wanted strong people to challenge him or, in Izuka's case, walk beside him. They opened the door and were immediately met by the sight of the glasses boy, Ida, scolding a blonde boy for putting his feet on the desks. The other boy was rubbing the back of his head and apologizing with a smirk, but the moment Izuka walked in, Ida's attention honed in on her and he marched over. "Greetings. I am Tenya Ida, from Somei Junior High. You are Miss Midoriya, correct?" he asked, punctuating his words with strange robotic chopping motions. "Yes. You know my name?" Izuka asked, slightly puzzled. She didn't remember telling him during the exams. Ida nodded. "Yes, I learned of it after the exam. I have much to thank you for," he said, remembering the day he received his acceptance letter. Tenya was sitting in his room, grasping his letter with a small amount of nerves. Carefully opening it so as to preserve the envelope, he discovered a small hollow disk and put it on his desk to activate it. Almost immediately, an image appeared of All Might wearing a gaudy yellow suit and standing in what looked like a game show set. "I am here in hologram form," All Might declared, surprising Tenya a bit. "Leave to you today to have pro-heroes like All Might personally record its acceptance or rejection messages in hologram form. As you may know, young Ida, I have decided to take a teaching position at Yude starting this year, so I have been asked to perform this task." All Might was suddenly distracted by someone muttering from out of view, "Wrap it up? But this is an important one." "It's okay, we've got time." Tenya frowned. "So even a hero like All Might did things like this?" Continuing on, "You passed the written exam with a good score, and you also managed 6th place in the practical exam with a score of 52 villain points. However, it appears you didn't fully grasp the secret of the exam. As for rescue points, you received only 9, resulting in a top score of 61 points. However, despite a clearly passing grade, you almost lost your spot." Tenya paled drastically as a clip played of his interaction with the medic girl. He cringed as he watched himself scold the girl for helping people, even if he thought she was hurting the other boy, and then cringed even harder as the girl raced off to protect another examinee, taking down a massive 0-pointer in the process. All Might reappeared on screen. That little interaction caused some of the examiners to question whether you were truly right to be a hero in Yudare's program, so naturally, they asked for the opinion of the young medic, Izuka Midoriya. The boy felt like crying. There was no way he'd be allowed in after they asked the medic. He had interfered with her work and could have gotten another student hurt as a result. The picture changed to that of the girl and a trio of people Tenya didn't recognize. Miss Midoriya, we wanted to ask your opinion on a participant. A lady in a business suit said. Mr. Tenya Ida earned 6th place with 52 villain points and 9 rescue points for a combined 61 points. However, after seeing his interaction with you as you healed that other boy, we are having some doubts about him. What do you think of him? A police officer asked. I think he deserves his place in UA, the girl answered. He was kind of rash, but I think he's just very earnest. From his point of view, I was another examinee that was potentially hurting someone. My pink flames, despite their color, do look dangerous, and because I have to physically touch the wound, it often looks like I'm causing the patient pain. If anything, I think it was admirable that he stopped his own test to potentially protect another student, even if he was mistaken. Plus, when I explained myself, he seemed genuinely apologetic, though the 0-pointer stopped him from having a chance to apologize. He did also do as I asked and took the injured person out of the area. Tenya stared at the image blankly. That girl, Izuka Midoriya, had defended him? You see, young Ida? A hero is someone that seeks to help others, but we are still human and make mistakes. So, come to you today and learn with us, to help others and make fewer mistakes. Congratulations, Tenya Ida. You today will be your hero academia. Back in the present, Tenya bowed deeply. I owe you a debt of gratitude, both for correcting my foolishness and speaking in my defense. Thank you very much, Miss Midoriya. Izuka blushed and began trying to form a flustered response. I was nothing. You seemed like a good guy, and you just made a logical mistake. You don't owe me anything, so just call me Izuka, or just Midoriya if you prefer. This 4 eyes bugging you, Izukin? Kaken asked, stepping between Ida and Izuka with a vicious glare. You said Some, right? So you're just a stuck-up elite. I'll enjoy kicking you into the dirt. What nerve! You want to be a hero? Ida yelled, taken aback by the explosive blonde's declaration. Kaken, that's enough. I'm sorry, Ida. Kaken is kind of fired up for our first day, you know? Izuka pulled Kaken away, holding his arm tightly. Before Katsuki could descend into a stream of curse words, the classroom door opened again, and this time, Ochako Uraraka walked in. Ah, Izuka. It's great to see you in person again. Thanks again for beating up the 0-pointer for me. That kick was awesome. You were all fiery and sparkling, and then Phoenix Talon, and the robot just went down like a sack of potatoes. DMN it Deku, you used Phoenix Talon? I've been bugging you to use it in our matches for months. Katsuki growled. I believe that if Izuka had used it, you'd not likely survive. She blasted through the 0-pointer's head with no effort. Ida cut in. By the way, Izuka, as you graciously allowed me to use your first name, you may call me Tenya. Momo Yayarozu, who had been sat in the back corner, chose that moment to walk over and join the conversation. You certainly have an eclectic group of friends, Izuka. Momo. Yeah, I only had Kaken before the entrance exams, now I've got him as well as you, Ochako, and Tenya. Have you met any of the others yet? Izuka asked, looking around the room. The blonde boy smirked at her but otherwise paid no attention to what their group was doing. There were a few other interesting people too, some that Izuka recognized from the exams. There was a funny blonde boy with effeminate eyes and a constant sparkle around him, a very tall boy with multiple arms connected by webbing, and even one with the head of a bird. I wonder what we'll be doing today. Do you think it's just the entrance ceremony and guidance counselor stuff? Chako commented, bouncing excitedly. Izuka was about to answer when she heard a ruffling from behind Ochako. Leaning around the other girl, Izuka's sweat dropped at the appearance of Aizawa-sensei, wrapped up in his signature yellow sleeping bag. A caterpillar cosplay? If you're gonna be fooling around and looking for friends, then get lost. This is the hero program. Aizawa-sensei said, slowly getting up and prying himself from his comfy position. At his glare, everyone settled down in the assigned seats. When they were quiet, Aizawa-sensei frowned. It seriously took you 8 seconds to sit and be quiet? You brats. Life is short, you know. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Pleasure to meet you, he introduced, his blank and tired expression not really matching his words. He rifled through his sleeping bag for a moment, then threw a bundle of gym clothes at the class. "Put those on, then get to the P.E. grounds," he ordered, sending the class into a scramble to find a suitable set of gym clothes. Once everyone had a fitting set, they raced off to the locker rooms to change and met in the expansive P.E. grounds. Izuka looked around, mildly interested. The P.E. grounds were basically just a bigger version of what most schools had and wasn't used often in UA, with it usually being utilized by the non-hero courses for physical education. As the class assembled, Aizawa was already waiting with a bored look on his face. "We'll be having a quirk apprehension test," he said simply, shocking his students. "Isn't it kind of soon?" "What about the entrance ceremony?" Chaco asked. "Heroes don't have time for niceties like that, though I suppose we can do it later if you all survive," the man answered ominously. UA is famed for granting students a large range of freedoms, but those freedoms extend to us teachers too. Aizawa stepped forward and fiddled with a PDA-like device, which projected a scoreboard onto the side of a wall. Their names were listed by their seat number, Izuka being 18 and Katsuki being 17, and there were 9 columns beside their names, each headed with the name of an activity with the final column being marked total. Softball pitch, standing long jump, 50-meter dash, endurance running, grip strength, sideways jumps, pull UPS and sit UPS. 8 activities you all know from middle school, but naturally, you were forbidden from using your quirks? Aizawa explained, turning his attention to Katsuki. "Bakugu, what was your middle school record for the softball pitch?" 67 meters, the boy answered. Aizawa tossed a softball to Katsuki, who caught it easily and noted the strange device built into it. "Try using your quirk. So long as you don't leave the circle, everything you do is fine." "You got it," Katsuki said. "I'll just apply a little shock wave and die," he roared, throwing the ball with all his might, launching it with an explosion at the apex of his throw. The ball rocketed into the distance, landing far out of the student's sight. Aizawa held up the PDA, which had a record of 705.2 meters, which was added to the appropriate part of the score table. "Before we can teach you, we need to know where you are in regards to your quirk, both in power and ingenuity. This test will establish the foundation of your hero skills, and from there, we can build on them," Aizawa explained. "Whoa, over 700 meters? That's unreal," a red-haired boy exclaimed. "This looks so fun." Ochako squealed happily. Izuka paled. "Oh no. You had to say it," she whispered, already seeing the darkening look on their teacher's face. If she had learned one thing about Aizawa's teaching style, it was that you never took his lessons with anything but the utmost seriousness. "Ah, it looks like fun, you say?" Aizawa began quietly, sending a chill up their spines with how cold his voice was. "So you thought you'd spend the next 3 years having fun? What happened to being heroes?" "All right then, here's a new rule. The student who ranks last in total points will be deemed hopeless and instantly expelled." The whole class was stunned, their eyes widening with terror. Aizawa smirked. "This is another example of our freedom as teachers. We can dispense with students as we wish," he chuckled darkly. "Welcome to the hero program." That snapped the students out of their fear and many began protesting, arguing it was unfair, but Aizawa was unrelenting. "Natural disasters, massive accidents, terrible villains, the world is full of horrible calamities and it is all thoroughly unfair. It is our job as heroes to correct that and restore reason to the chaos. You aren't here as simple high schoolers, chatting and having fun. You are heroes in training, and from now on, your lives at this school are going to be one challenge after another. If you can't manage it, then quit, or grow stronger, go beyond. That is the meaning of our motto, plus ultra." Just as soon as he had struck fear into them, Aizawa had now lit the fires of inspiration. Each of these 20 prospective heroes were now chomping at the bit to meet the challenge. The first trial was the 50-meter dash, and while each dash had 2 participants, they were really racing against the whole class. Izuka took this chance to catalog the names of those classmates she didn't already know. The effeminate blonde boy was named Yuga Aoyama and scored 5.51 seconds by using his quirk, Naval Laser, like a rocket, though using the beam for more than a second caused him stomach pain. A pink-skinned girl with horns, Mina Ishido, managed 5.46 seconds, barely beating Aoyama by using her acid to skate across the ground. A frog-like girl named Tsuyu Azui was able to clear the track in 4.58 seconds with frog-like leaps, while Tenya was able to use his amazing engine quirk to clear it in 3.04 seconds. Ochako was less successful, using her zero-gravity quirk to remove the weight of her shoes and clothing, shaving a few seconds off her middle school time for a total of 7.15 seconds. A boy named Mashireo Ojiro scored 5.49 seconds by kangaroo jumping with his tail. This continued for a while, but few other people got superhuman scores aside from Todoroki, who skated across the frozen track for a score of 5.23 seconds. When it came time for Katsuki and Izuka, both stepped up to the starting line and took their positions. At first, Izuka had planned to hold back and stay in the middle of the pack. She didn't want the whole class's attention on her, but seeing how strong everyone was working, she felt it would be an insult to use any less than 100% of her safe power. Katsuki immediately exploded across the track, scoring 4.13 seconds, but Izuka hadn't started. Until she crossed the starting line, her time wouldn't start, so she focused her powers carefully, channeling 20% of One for All and a large amount of fire to her legs, as well as summoning her wings. In a flash, she exploding over the start line, shooting across the track like a jet plane before finally crossing the finish line. She was going so fast, she actually had to perform a loop while slowing herself to prevent herself from colliding with a wall. The robot that was recording their scores beeped and announced, 2.01 seconds. Katsuki's eyes narrowed. Sheet, Izukan's really going all out? The rest of the class appeared equally shocked, though Ochako and Tenya, who had seen her take down the zero-pointer, wasn't too surprised. No one had time to really comment, though, as Aizawa kept them moving. In the end, the only other super results were a short boy with grape-like hair named Minor Mineta, who used his strange quirk to create bouncy ball to bounce himself across the finish line, and Momo, who actually created a motorized scooter with her quirk, earning her third place after Izuka and Tenya. The second trial, Grip Strength, ended in an unquestioning victory for the multi-armed boy, Mizo Shoji, who was able to call on gorilla-like strength. Second went to a buff boy with big lips named Rikido Sato, who used some sugar to boost his strength and get a fairly super score. Izuka ended up third. She wasn't very good in using One for All for actions that didn't require momentum, which also made it so she couldn't use her flames. Still, third place wasn't bad. The third trial, Standing Long Jump, had a lot of super results. Izuka simply flew, and since there was no known limit to her flight, she got a score of infinity. Many others got amazing scores, with most clearing the sandbox. Aoyama shot himself over with his laser, Azui leapt over easily, Ochako was able to float herself across, though the nausea it caused made it so she couldn't get an infinity score. Ojiro bounded across with his tail. Sato did the same with sugar empowering his legs. A plain-faced guy called Hantasiro was able to shoot tape from his elbows to pull himself across without touching the ground. Katsuki used his explosions to propel himself, and Mineta created a bundle of his bouncy ball to shoot himself across. The fourth trial, Repeated Sidesteps, was unusual. Because of the limits, most people got only a normal score, though people like Izuka and Katsuki, who could shoot things from their hands, were able to get superhuman scores, though funnily enough, it was Mineta who scored first place by bouncing himself between two piles of his ball. The fifth trial was the softball pitch, which Katsuki had already completed. Ochako proved the winner with the class's second infinity score thanks to her zero-gravity quirk. Izuka herself somewhat copied Katsuki's showing by combining One for All and her flames, resulting in her scoring second place with 856.3 meters. The last three trials were rather uninteresting, as despite the quirks on show, they all came down to endurance, and that was something that only a few of them had a lot of. The endurance run went to Momo, who used her created scooter to get the third and final infinity score. As for pull-ups, Izuka won that trial by simply gripping the bar and flying up and down with her wings, stopping after she had beaten the previous high score, held by Shoji. Sit-Upus was kind of disappointing. It was the last trial, so most people were already spent, and even Izuka was running low on energy, only managing to get second place, a couple of dozen sit-ups behind Shoji, who was apparently a bit of a stamina freak. Without a word, Aizawa input the last of the results into his PDA and the scoreboard rearranged itself to reflect the positions of the students. Izuka Midoriya, Momo Yaoyorozu, Shoto Todoroki, Katsuki Bakugu, Tenya Ida, Fumikage Tokoyami, Mizo Shoji, Mashireo Ojiro, Ijiro Kirishima, Mina Ishido, Uchako Uraraka, Koji Koda, Rikido Sato, Tsuyu Azui, Yuga Oyama, Antasiro, Denki Kaminari, Kyokujiro, Toru Hagakure, Minoru Mineta. Izuka felt her heart skip a beat when she saw she was at the top. Technically, she'd come in the top 3 of every trial, so it wasn't a huge surprise, but her humble side hadn't allowed her to think about it. She turned her attention to Mineta, who was shaking in fear upon seeing he was ranked last. Izuka couldn't help but feel a bit sorry for him, so she decided to risk Aizawa's wrath. Sensei? I had a question, she said, stepping forward and desperately trying to ignore all the attention that was now on her. What is it, Midoriya? Aizawa asked, boredom in his eyes. It's just, isn't this exam a bit illogical? Izuka asked, a bit too quickly. Oh, why should you complain? You got first place? Aizawa retorted. But that's because my quirk is suited to this kind of thing. I mean, your own quirk wouldn't have been able to do anything to help you in this test, but you're still a great hero. Wouldn't it be unfair to judge someone hopeless in a test like this? I mean, Mineta technically scored last because his body isn't well suited for this sort of exam, but he did amazing on a few of the exams because he could use his quirk creatively. Isn't that enough reason to say he isn't hopeless? She argued, feeling a little braver. Mineta looked up at Izuka with tears in his eyes. He was about 1 moment away from dropping to his knees and worshipping her like a goddess. Katsuki growled at the looks the small boy was giving his girl, but couldn't really fault him. His Izuka was DMN cute. Aizawa narrowed his eyes and used his capture weapon to drag Izuka towards him, making her squeak in surprise. Didn't I say this is no place to be trying to make friends? I'm not. I'm just saying what I think is right. You shouldn't expel anyone. Izuka shot back, terrified but unwilling to just surrender. Aizawa stared at her for a minute, before smirking and releasing her. You still have that demon spark in you. You are way too much like your dad, he muttered, before turning to the class. I lied about the expulsion thing. It was a logical ruse to drive you forward and push your limits. For the record, if I really wanted to expel any of you brats, no amount of arguing will stop me, though Midoriya does bring up a good point. So long as your chances aren't 0, I won't be dropping you. But should they drop to 0 at any time, I'll kick your buttes to the curve. There were sighs of relief, and Mineta burst into happy tears, glad he wouldn't be kicked out. Aizawa allowed them to have the celebrations for a bit. He was tough, not heartless. Alright, that's enough now. Since I expelled my whole class on the first day last year, the principal has given me some new guidelines I have to follow, so we've got one last activity before we head inside. It's optional, and if you must, you can consider this fun or whatever. Aizawa snapped his fingers and some of the scoring robots ran off, only to reappear moments later with a series of circular and human-shaped targets made of concrete. This is the signature move showcase. We don't assist in the development of special or signature moves until just before the provisional license exams, but every kid that aspires to become a hero usually has 1 or 2 moves dreamed up before reaching high school. So, to ensure they're safe and to let you brats show off some more, we're going to try them out. Step forward if you have a move, Aizawa said, pointing to a spot to his right, directly across the assembled targets. Ishido, Tenya, a girl with long earlobes named Kyokujiro, Katsuki, Izuka and Mineta all stepped forward. Aizawa-sensei nodded at them. Ishido, you're first? The pink girl grinned. Well, mine isn't an attack, but it's still my signature, she said gleefully. With a spray of acid from her feet, Ishido began to surf around on the ground, showing she had quite a lot of balance and maneuverability when using her signature. Acid Surfer. A potentially dangerous move, especially since it wrecks the ground. Aizawa said, ruefully staring at the melted earth that marked Ishido's trail. For now, don't use it inside the school. In a live hero situation, be cautious too, as excess acid could hurt others who step on it without realizing, and it can also cause you trouble as it could be considered unnecessarily collateral damage. Still, a creative move, he judged. Next, Ida charged at the target, a huge burst of air coming from his engines as he launched a kick. Recipro burst, he yelled, cleaving the head off a target with his kick. So you push your engines to their max and gain even greater speed for a short time. But it looks like it disables your engines. Practice with it to extend the time it lasts, but use it conservatively, the teacher said. Ida nodded and moved aside as Jiro stepped forward. She ran forward and directed her ear lobes, which were like headphone jacks, to stab into a target. Heart throb, she cried, and the target exploded with a powerful sound wave. Aizawa whistled, impressive. You channel the sound of your heartbeat through your earphone jacks to create a concussive sound wave. Be careful with that attack, it'll likely do a fair bit of damage to a person, even if they don't explode like the target. Katsuki was next, and he smirked as he prepared his current ace move, one that had even allowed him to put a mark on All Might in a sparring match. Nitro Blaster, he yelled, launching a series of highly focused explosions at the targets. By minimizing and tightly controlling the strength of the launching explosion, he could cause his sweat droplets to be launched without immediately exploding, then shoot explosive sparks to ignite them and create what appeared to be a semi-automatic explosion gun. Each individual explosion was smaller than his full explosions, but they could be used at range and in large numbers, allowing him to build up larger explosions without straining his arms. It was light enough to knock an enemy out without killing them or causing debilitating harm. Tisich, just what I'd expect from one of those two. Aizawa muttered. Bakugu, that is a well-thought-out move and it shows you have good control of your quirk. I'd keep that as a trump card until you have a more powerful move. The explosive boy just smirked and walked back to the others as Izuka took his spot in front of the targets. Only a handful were left, so she decided to let loose a bit. Phoenix feathers, she shouted, firing several feather-shaped darts made of fire, each one striking a different area of the targets and then exploding in a burst of flame. The move was Izuka's answer to Katsuki's Nitro Blaster and worked in a somewhat similar fashion. Izuka conjured many flames and then concentrated them into compact feathers, which would stick to whatever she threw them at, then explode when she released the compression of the flames. The strength of the darts were completely dependent on how much fire she conjured and how tightly she concentrated it. It lacked the concussive force of Katsuki's move, but was more accurate thanks to Izuka being able to control the darts once she'd launched them. You used the feathers? You should have used Talon. Katsuki complained, still a bit peeved he hadn't gotten to see it. Talon is my emergency move. I can't use it on a person, or even near people. It could do serious damage. Izuka argued. Then it was wise not to use it. I assume a hero nerd like yourself has a lot of signature moves, right? Aizawa-sensei said with a knowing look. Izuka blushed and nodded, trying to block out the amazed looks of her classmates. Mineta was last, and used his quirk to completely cover a human target in his purple ball, essentially immobilizing them, if they'd been a moving person at least, before dashing and slapping them across the st in a move he called Grape Rush. Aizawa looked less impressed, but still commented, a good move for capture, though with such a weak slap, it ended kind of anticlimactically. I guess you could improve it with some support items. Also improve your aim, that way you can immobilize your opponent without using so many ball and save yourself time. As that was the last move being showcased, Aizawa-sensei called for the robots to deal with the remains of the targets, then turned back to his students. Right, now get changed back into your uniforms and come to the classroom. We've still got more of the principal's requirements to meet, he said, a tad bitterly. The class nodded and ran back to the changing rooms. Izuka was interested in what the principal was making Aizawa do, but she was drawn from her thoughts when she realized she had been surrounded by all the other girls. Are you guys okay? Did you need something? She stuttered nervously. You were pretty amazing out there, Midori. Ashido cheered. You seem so timid, but then you totally kicked butt. Yeah, and you even talked back to Aizawa-sensei. That took guts. Jiro added. Izuka blushed. I felt he was being a little unfair. Plus, it's a hero's job to butt into others' business for the sake of helping them, right? Momo chuckled. As expected of you, Izuka. I'm glad I was at least beaten by a real hero. The invisible girl, Toru Hagakure, piped up, heck yeah. 2 girls took the top 2 spots in the class. Midoriya and Yaoyorozu are the best. You should have seen Izuka take down the 0-pointer. The move she used made her phoenix feathers look like sparklers. Ochako added. Azui tilted her head, a finger to her lips. I've been meaning to ask, aren't you the same girl from the Monkalama incident? The one that got an award for protecting the village and saving 2 pros by beating the villain. I knew I recognized your name from somewhere. Ashido exclaimed, Midori, you're amazing. Izuka waved her hands frantically. It was nothing like that. The heroes, Water Hose, did most of the actual work. I was just able to assist enough to make it a more decisive victory. I got so much credit because my quirk let me heal them after the fight. Just as you healed All Might after the All for 1 kidnappings? Azui asked. That silenced the girls quickly, especially when Izuka looked away. Many people praised her for coming away from the kidnapping with so little trauma, and for healing All Might, but not many really thought about the people who didn't come away at all, other than those people's families. Izuka was only one of 36 people kidnapped, including the lesser-known pro, Clementine Man, and yet all the others were killed after having their quirks stolen or deemed useless. Why yeah, that was me too. I'm kind of shy when it comes to people I'm not familiar with, and I still don't like crowds. Izuka shrugged, her eyes downcast. What exactly did they do to you, Midori? You were taken for a whole year? Ashido asked. Ashido? Jiro scolded as Izuka flinched. CRP, I'm sorry, Midori. You don't need to tell us anything you don't want to, the pink girl quickly apologized. It's fine. Izuka said, smiling softly, it's not like I don't want to say, but I'm not really allowed to. If that changes, I'll tell you, she explained. Strictly speaking, it was true. She didn't mind telling others, but the government had forbidden it unless it was unavoidable. Plus, a small part of Izuka feared telling others, in case they blamed her or judged her for what happened. Izuka wouldn't blame them. At her lowest moments, she blamed and judged herself. Azui nodded. I'm sorry for bringing it up, but I always like to say what's on my mind. Saving All Might and helping in the Monkalama incident already makes you a hero, at least in my opinion. Call me Tsuyu? Okay, Tsuyu. You can call me Izuka, the girl smiled. You can all call me that if you like. I'd like us to be friends. Yes. We definitely want to be friends. Call me Mina. Ashido said, jumping up and down happily. And me, Drew. Hagakure added, gesturing even more wildly so she was noticed. You can call me Kyoka? Jiro said, pulling out her phone. The other girls did the same and they all exchanged numbers. By the time they were done, they quickly dressed and hightailed it back to the classroom. When everyone was back and seated, Aizawa appeared from behind his desk, once again wrapped in his sleeping bag. Alright, since the hero department doesn't have its own entrance ceremony like the other departments, we'll be doing a meet and greet before I send you home. Come up here and tell us all your name, your quirk, and if you feel like it, some stuff about you and why you became a hero. Do it in seat order. You first? The flamboyant blonde hopped to his feet and stood in front of the class, basking in the attention, his sparkles on full blast. I am the shining Yuga Aoyama. My quirk, naval laser, lets me shoot a sparkling laser from my belly button. I will become the most dazzling hero to ever live, he declared, striking numerous poses. Next was Mina. Hi. I'm Mina Ashido and my quirk is acid. Can secrete acid from pretty much anywhere, and can control the viscosity and potency of it. As a side effect, I have this awesome pink skin, but don't ask about the horns. I have no idea what the deal with them is, but they're kind of rubbery. She proved this by bending one of the horns and making it flick. I like dancing, so if any of you are into freestyle dancing, then come talk to me. I can get you into an awesome studio. Then it was Tsuyu's turn. Hello, I am Tsuyu Azui, but you can all call me Tsuyu. As you can see, my quirk gives me frog-like characteristics. I have a long tongue, can stick to walls and can create a weak poison. I'm currently working on camouflage too, and I have another ability, but it's gross so I won't explain it. I always say what is on my mind, and I like playing with my young siblings. I don't like the cold, it makes me want to hibernate, she said, before allowing Tenya to take the stage. I am Tenya Ida. My quirk is Engine and I am the younger brother of Ingenium, one of the greatest heroes. I wish to be just like him, so I'm going to work very strong, he declared. Izuka was a little surprised when he sat down. She thought he'd have spoken for longer. Ochako was the last in her row, and was clearly a bit embarrassed to be speaking in front of them all. I'm Ochako Uraraka. My quirk is zero gravity, and I can remove the gravity from anything I touch, but if I push it, it makes me nauseous. I really like matcha. I also live alone, since my parents live out in the countryside. I don't like fighting, I want to be a rescue hero like 13. The new row started with Ojiro. My name is Mashireo Ojiro. My quirk is just my tail, which is practically a third arm. I study martial arts to improve my skills so I can fight and defend people, he introduced. Izuka got the feeling he was a very straightforward and earnest person. Next was the blonde boy that Tenya had been scolding earlier. Now that she could see him better, Izuka noticed a few black streaks in his hair, which resembled a lightning bolt. Hey, I'm Denki Kaminari. My quirk lets me discharge electricity, but if I use too much, it fries my brain and I kind of turn stupid for a while. I'm a fan of music, so if any of you like it too, let me know and we can have a jam session. The redhead was next. I'm Ijiro Kirishima and I want to be a super manly hero like my idol, Crimson Riot. My quirk, hardening, lets me harden my skin and gives me a kind of rocky appearance, he demonstrated, and his arm really did look like rock. It ain't flashy, but it also lets me hit pretty strong, so I'm a fairly good fighter. Next was Koji Koda, a large boy with a uniquely shaped head. He didn't actually speak and just wrote his name on a small whiteboard as well as his quirk, Ani voice, which let him talk to and control animals. He came across as shy and cute, despite his somewhat odd appearance, and Izuka couldn't help but feel he was a sweetheart. Last in the row was Sato. I am Rikido Sato. My quirk, Sugar Rush, improves my strength as I consume sugar, but it also reduces my cognitive functions and I get tired faster. Still, 'cause of my quirk, I love to bake, so I may occasionally bring in sweets for everyone. Katsuki smirked at that. He could practically feel Izuka salivating behind him. That girl loved sweets. She'd eat nothing else if her parents let her. The next student was Mizo Shoji, a rather odd boy that kept his mouth covered and had 6 arms, 3 on either side connected by webbing. He briefly explained how he could change any of his arms into other parts of his body through his quirk, dupli arms, but said little else besides that he had no real interest in material things. He seemed friendly, despite his rather imposing appearance. Then came Jiro. I'm Kyoka Jiro. My quirk, earphone jack, is the same as my mom's and it gives me super hearing and lets me channel and amplify sound waves, usually my heartbeat. It's probably not a surprise that I love music. Both my parents are in the music industry, but I wanted to help others, so I want to be a hero instead of following in their footsteps, she explained, a bashful look on her face as she fiddled with her jacks, poking the ends together. Izuka and the other girls clapped and cheered for her, making Kyoka smirk and return to her seat with a bit more courage. Hantasiro was next, but Katsuki found him to be boring. He was a fairly average teenage boy that had the longing to be a hero, though both Katsuki and Izuka couldn't deny he was friendly, and while he was very proud of his tape quirk, he wasn't arrogant about it and seemed to want to impress the class. He sat down happily after a few people clapped and shouted approving comments of his quirk. Izuka thought it would make an amazing capture method against villains. The bird-faced boy stood and introduced himself next. I am Fumikage Tokoyami. My quirk, Dark Shadow, allows me to summon a sentient shadow that is connected to me. Despite being a shadow, it has a physical form and can be used for attack and defense. He summoned the creature, which looked like a simplified shadow version of Tokoyami himself that was connected to him. He has a personality of his own and he grows stronger as it gets darker. As he grows more powerful, he becomes strong to control and in complete darkness, he is nearly unstoppable and will rampage. It is a tormented existence, for I love the darkness yet can never truly embrace it. Katsuki felt like smacking himself to erase that line from his memory, But Izuka just felt sorry for the boy. It must be really strong to have a quirk that made it dangerous to embrace the things you loved. She smiled brightly as Tokoyami returned to his seat, making the boy recoil from the brightness of her happy face, though he did nod in appreciation. Todoroki took his place at the front and simply revealed his name and said, "My quirk makes ice," before returning to his seat. He wasn't very sociable apparently. Next was Invisible Girl Toru. "Hi. I'm Toru Hagakure and my quirk makes me invisible. I don't stand out much, so I'm sorry if I accidentally surprise you. I love those funny hidden camera shows too. Ooh, and I love caramel. Sato, if you make any of that, I'll love you forever," she said, bubbly personality on full display. Sato grinned and gave her a thumbs up. Izuka suddenly gulped when it was Katsuki's turn. "Please be nice," she whispered. The boy just smirked, which did not make her feel better, as he took Toru's place at the front of the room. "The name is Katsuki Bakugu. My quirk blows sheet up and I am more than happy to use it on any dumbass that sees me off. I'm going to be the #1 hero in the future, and I won't hesitate to kick anyone's butt if they get in my way, guy or girl. Also, if any of you sheets call me Kaken, then I'll f***ing kill you." End of intro, he said with a sneer, before taking his seat in dead silence, everyone either too scared or too shocked to comment or clap. Izuka pouted as he smirked at her, but it was her turn so she had to take the stage and introduce herself. Since her Phoenix, Link evolution and One for All quirks were all technically secret, Sir Night Eye had come up with a plausible explanation for an alternate quirk that would let her use most of her abilities. "Hello. My name is Izuka Midoriya. I know a lot of you might recognize the name or my face, so I'll just say that yes, I am the same person from the Monkalama incident and the All for One kidnappings. If it's okay, I'd rather not talk about the latter. My quirk is named Omniflame and gives me a whole bunch of abilities based around fire. I can fly, create and control flames, I'm immune to fire completely, can use them to heal others by making pink flames, and I can make ones that only exist inside my body. They're kind of green looking and make me super strong, but I can get hurt if I push my body's limits. Oh, and I can sort of change how fire reacts to me. It's usually untouchable like this." Izuka created a small fireball and put her hand inside it, but if I want, I can make it a bit physical. The flames flickered for a moment and then Izuka touched it again. This time it moved and jiggled, almost like gel. When it's solid, it still burns but can't spread and I can bounce off it. It also feels kind of like jelly. Izuka bounced the fireball like a RBB ball before banishing it. "I like drawing and I want to be the best rescue hero, who can save everyone. Also, don't be scared of Kaken. He is actually a nice guy once you get to know him. Like I am." Katsuki yelled as Izuka took her seat. Still, the class clapped politely and the girls all smiled at her. A few people made muttered comments that with a quirk like hers, it was no wonder Izuka came first in the apprehension test, and there was more than a bit of admiration in their eyes. She much preferred that to the pity that had appeared when she mentioned the kidnappings. The last two introductions were Mineta and Momo. Mineta was almost immediately labeled a pervert after talking for a solid minute on how much he loved girls, until Katsuki began making small explosions between his fingers, scaring Mineta into wrapping up his introduction and sitting down. Momo was much better received by the class. Her creation quirk was the stuff of dreams, and even Izuka, with her amazing quirk, was a little jealous of what Momo could do. With Momo's intellect and amazing quirk, she could easily reach the top of the class in any of U.A's programs. When Momo sat down, Aizawa stood back up and sighed. "All right, you've had the apprehension test to show you actually have a chance, and now you all know each other. Be warned, real classes start tomorrow and we won't hesitate to kick you to the curb if we judge you to be a detriment to the program or have no chance of progressing further. We're going to work you to the bone, little eggs," he said, a scary smirk appearing on his face. Izuka smiled, feeling anticipation building inside her. Together with Class 1A, they were going to become amazing heroes. The first day of lessons at U.A brought a wave of nostalgia for Izuka. She'd been coming to U.A for tutoring since she was 10, but it was a very different experience than the traditional classroom setting, which she hadn't been a part of since she was kidnapped during elementary school. Sitting behind a desk, surrounded by her peers while listening to a teacher lecturing was a much less personal experience compared to the tutoring, but she couldn't deny that she liked it. The lessons themselves were fairly easy, since Izuka had been studying with Nizu, but they were made interesting by the teachers themselves, all of whom were pro-heroes. Present Mike taught English, Cementos taught modern literature, Ectoplasm taught mathematics, and even Midnight taught a lesson, modern hero art history. The classes themselves were fairly normal despite the hero teachers, though each one did discreetly acknowledge Izuka, or at least Ectoplasm and Cementos did. Present Mike outright called her out to chat before class, and Midnight insisted on her hugging her in front of all of Class 1A when she first walked into the room. Even lunch was a normal experience made interesting by the person in charge, the cooking hero lunch rush. But finally, the afternoon came, and just as Aizawa was settling the class for the pre-hero studies homeroom, the door was thrown open. "I am here." Izuka grinned. "He came?" All Might, dressed in his Silver Age costume, burst through the door. "I'm coming through the door like a normal person," he announced, noticeably not entering through the door like a normal person. The class went wild. "I can't believe it. All Might's really gonna be teaching us. Check out that costume. It's so Silver Age it gives me goosebumps." Aizawa just scowled at the man. "You're early for the first time in your life, and in the process, interrupt homeroom? Only you, All Might." All Might's smile turned bashful. "My apologies, Aizawa. I wanted to come early so I could give my introductions and get to know the class before we do the first hero activity. I also brought some upperclassmen to talk to you all." Aizawa just sighed. "I'll leave it to you then. Just don't keep those three out of class for long," he said, already having guessed who the upperclassmen were. He walked out and 3 third-years walked in. 2 boys and a girl. The first boy was very muscular and had blonde hair reminiscent of a young Present Mike, though his face was oddly plain. The second boy was a gloomy-looking guy with wild black hair, and the final student, the girl, had very long light blue hair that reached her legs and twisted as it reached her waist. All Might smiled at them, and Izuka practically jumped out of her seat. "Mirio-senpai." "Izuka, it's good to see you as a student finally. The nurse's office has been a more somber place without you scampering about." The blonde boy grinned, ruffling Izuka's hair. Seeing the class looking confused, All Might introduced them. "Class, these are the 3 top-ranked students among the third years here, and are thus the top 3 hero students in both UDA and the country as a whole. We call them the Big 3. I've heard of these guys, they're on a whole other level compared to us." Jiro commented. "Yes, these 3 are the pride of UDA. All Might said, gesturing towards the dark-haired boy. "Let's start with brief introductions. Amajiki, you start us off." The dark-haired boy's eyes shifted, and his glance sent much of the class reeling from the intense impact. Even Izuka, who knew the guy already, was unable to fully resist the strong look. "It's no good, Rio. Hato," he said darkly. The class gulped. Was he judging them hopeless? Suddenly, the boy's shaking became noticeable. "No matter how strong I try to see them as potatoes, only their heads turn. They keep human bodies, so I can't see them as anything but human. What do I do?" The words won't come. 1A exchanged curious looks. "My mind's going blank, it hurts." Amajiki turned and put his head against the blackboard. "I wanna go home." Izuka frowned. Tamaki-senpai? It's all right. Everyone here is nice," she said, remembering how shy this guy was from the occasions he came to the nurse's office with Mirio. Tamaki Amajiki turned to look at her, and she smiled kindly, making him immediately shove his face back against the blackboard. "Mirio, I can't deal with your friend. She's too sunny for me." The female third year just giggled. "Hee, don't worry boys and girls. This guy is Tamaki Amajiki. He's kind of a chicken, even though he's human. We're right? Anyway, I'm Nijire Hato. All Might Sensei asked us to come talk to you and inspire you." Unfortunately, Hato's attention was immediately taken by asking everyone strange questions and moving on before actually getting an answer. She even asked Todoroki about his scar, which made the boy glare. "You're all so interesting. Izuka, you've got to tell me about all of Izuka just sighed. "Nijire-senpai, I can't give people's personal information without their permission." All Might looked just as lost as the rest of the class. Ah, I see Fat Gum and Ryukyu weren't kidding when they said even your personality quirks were amazing. You kids can probably already guess this, but young Midoriya has already met these three while training her healing quirk with Recovery Girl. Don't worry, All Might. I'm the key performer for today anyway. Mirio grinned, giving the pro a thumbs up. Greetings, Class 1A. I am Mirio Togata, your senpai. He made a strange pose that somewhat resembled a mix of All Might's muscle pose and Sir Night Eye's glasses correction pose, making him look like a JoJo. You are all about to take your first lesson in heroism, a very important step for young heroes, but as scary as it may seem, as serious and dangerous as it looks, all you need to do is put your heart into it and work strong. Even if you fail, you can learn from your failures and grow stronger. Izuka can tell you how badly I did in my first year. The class looked to Izuka, who blushed at the attention, but still nodded. Mirio-senpai made lots of mistakes and did really badly at first. I can't count the number of times I healed his bruises. He even messed up during a sports festival. But that all turned around toward the end of his first year. That was when I started my internship at Sir Naitai agency. He helped me cultivate my abilities and become as skilled as I am, and yet I still have a long way to go. Mirio cheered. Just remember, so long as you stay determined and optimistic, then no matter how low you fall, you can rise back up. Trust yourselves, trust each other and grow strong. Plus Ultra. Everyone cheered and shouted Plus Ultra, with even Tamaki-senpai coming out of his shell a bit and cheering as well, though much quieter. All Might nodded enthusiastically and patted all three third years on the back. Well said, young Togata. Sir Night Eye often tells me about how well you're doing. Fat Gum and Ryukyu spend just as much time bragging about you too as well, young Hado and Amajiki. The big three left with smiles and waves, leaving Class 1A pumped and ready for action. As they walked down the hallway, Nijire turned to the boys. They're a pretty interesting group. A lot of strong quirks and a lot of strong personalities too. A lot more potential than our own class had back then. Plus, they've got the most recommendation kids, the daughter of the government bigwig, Endeavor's son, and even the mysterious Midoriya from the All-for-One kidnappings. Tamaki commented quietly. Has Sir Night Eye explained more about her? Nijire asked, looking to Mirio. Nope. Sir just said to look out for her, as she'll be important in the future. I was pretty shocked when I found out the adorable little medic was already important. Sir was really protective over her, and apparently she has a connection to All Might. Mirio grinned. He privately made a note to ask to see the video of Class 1 as first hero lesson. Back in the classroom, the students were still chattering excitedly as All Might cheerfully listened to the enthusiasm of his students as he waited for the homeroom PRD to end so he could start the lesson proper. A few people ended up crowding around Izuka's desk. Hey Midoriya, you've really trained with Recovery Girl? Kirishima asked with a grin. Yeah, she's the only one around with a healing quirk anything like mine. My healing uses BLD, both mine and my patient's, so if I push it too strong, I can become anemic or suffer some really bad side effects from the BLD loss, so it was decided I'd train with Recovery Girl to control it. Izuka explained with a faint blush, so if any of you get hurt at all, I'll take care of you. Seriously, come to me even if it's just a paper cut or you feel sick. I heal illnesses too. That's really useful. With so many wild quirks in our class, I bet you'll get a lot of use out of that quirk. Kyoka smirked, remembering Aoyama's stomach aches, Ochako's nausea and Kaminari's electricity-induced stupidity. Say, can you heal scars? I've got one on my finger from a baking incident a few years ago. Sato asked, showing his left hand. A faint white line marred the inside of the finger from where a knife has slipped from Sato's grip and cut into it. Izuka just shook her head sadly, trying not to notice how Todoroki's hands clenched on his desk. I can only heal wounds that are recent. If it was cut again and the scar tissue was removed, then my flames would heal it back to how it used to look, but my flames don't recognize scar tissue as an injury, so I can't fix it. Izuka explained. Sato just grinned. Well, let's see it then, he said, and before Izuka could stop him, he used a small pocket knife to skillfully cut himself where his scar was. Izuka yelped and quickly conjured her pink flames and healed the cut before a drop of BLD could spill to the floor. Just as she said, the wound healed immediately and no scar was left behind. But just as Sato was happily inspecting his now blemish-free finger, Izuka lightly smacked him on the head, having to jump a bit due to their height difference. Don't do that again. Never ever hurt yourself, especially just to get rid of a scar, she scolded, looking more upset than angry. If you do that again, then I won't heal it and you'll just have to leave it to heal on its own, she threatened. Of course her threat was a blatant lie and both Katsuki and All Might could see it clearly. Sorry Midoriya. I just wanted to see the pink flames, they were really cool. Tell you what, I'll make your favorite sweet as an apology. What do you like? Sato said, guilt swamping him as he looked at the big doe-like eyes of the small girl. Izuka blushed and tried to look angry still, but it just came across as an adorable pout. I am still mad at you. A bribe won't change that, her face reddened another shade, but can you make some salted caramel? I really like those. Sato just grinned and nodded, I'll make you a whole bag of it. Izuka perked up, great. I actually wanted to ask, if you ever want some company when baking, then let me know. My mom and dad are great cooks and they've taught me almost everything I know. It'd be nice to make some good desserts for them and the class, she said, apparently forgetting her earlier anger. Everyone that had been listening burst into laughter, making Izuka squeak and blush adorably. She didn't know it, but the entire class had just labeled her, adorable cinnamon bunny. Katsuki smirked at her, but privately decided to lay down some ground rules with the other guys, no need to let them think they might have a chance with his bunny. All Might turned his back and his shoulders shook with the overwhelming urge to hug his adorable child. He'd have to go to the security office later to get pictures from the camera feed so he could show Inko. Inko had cried happy tears for an hour after learning that Izuka had made friends with several classmates. When the bell rang to signal the end of homeroom, All Might ushered everyone back to their seats and began his first lesson, Foundation Hero Studies. As the name suggests, we'll be building upon your hero foundation with a series of trials. Who can name the 3 official classifications of hero work and what they mean? Several hands raised and All Might chose Ida. The first classification is combat. It relates to when a hero is required to battle with criminals and/or villains. Correct. Now you. All Might pointed to. Sir. Rescue? It's when heroes rescue people from dangerous situations, right? Zero answered. Also correct, but you should show more confidence. Lastly, All Might pointed to Katsuki. The explosive boy raised an eyebrow. No clue. I only ever heard of combat and rescue. His words were echoed by most of the class. Very few people knew the third classification, even among officials and the public. Only Izuka and Momo had their arms raised. All Might grinned and chose Izuka. Think you know the answer, young Midoriya? Yes, sensei. Wow, it felt weird to call her dad sensei. The third classification is support. People forget about it because they confuse it with the concept of support items made for heroes. It refers to those that assist in emergencies without actually fighting or performing direct rescue. It includes things such as containing disasters, tracking villains, healing the injured, clearing debris and enabling other heroes to do their jobs more effectively. Most heroes specialize in combat or rescue, but every hero had done support work, either because their quirk isn't suitable for the situation or they are simply needed more elsewhere. Izuka said. All Might gave her a big thumbs up. Very good. A good example of a support hero is Recovery Girl. Healing heroes are rare but very useful in emergencies, since it's next to impossible to escape an emergency without someone getting hurt. But for today, we'll be performing a combat-oriented trial. The pro held up a small card with the word combat on it. And to go with your first combat trial, we've prepared your hero gear. The support class made it all to your specifications. Everyone cheered excitedly. Izuka pulled a tiny package from her backpack. Her mom had wanted to help contribute to the costume, but was limited because of Izuka's costumes needing to be fireproof. So Inko had secretly gone to see the tailor that made Izuka's day clothes and worked under his tutelage to create an accessory for Izuka's costume. Gripping the package and the case containing her full package, Izuka followed the other girls to the dressing rooms, All Might's voice echoing behind them all. And don't forget, from the moment you suit up, you are heroes. When Katsuki reached the boys' locker room, he decided now was as good a time as any to have his little talk with the other guys. Hey, you BS keep your paws off Izuka. She's mine, he growled, as blunt as ever. The other boys stared at him as if he'd just announced that he was the Queen of Monaco, and to be honest, compared to the idea of the explosive, brash boy being in a relationship with sweet and gentle Izuka Midoriya, the former was more likely. Tenya, not really fully grasping the meaning of what Katsuki had said, stood to scold the boy. Bakugo, I admire that you are protective of your friend, but it is not up to you to decide that Izuka cannot have other friends. That's not what he means, Ida. Kirishima interrupted, more than a little shocked by Katsuki's words. Bro, when you say Midoriya is yours, do you really mean she's your girlfriend, or just that you like her and want her to be your girlfriend? She's my girlfriend, and don't you forget it. We've been dating since we were like 13 or some shit. I don't give a shit if you want to be friends with her, the little rabbit would probably love that, but if you start trying to make a move on her, I'll kill you, got it? Katsuki yelled. Oh, that's cool. To be honest, I'm glad she is your girlfriend. If you had just wanted her to be, I'd have said it was super unmanly to stake a claim on her, like you own her or something. It's still kind of weird even if you are dating, but I guess some couples are like that, Kirishima said, smiling and brushing off Katsuki's threatening looks. Still, of all the guys in class to already have a girlfriend, it had to be Bakugo, Kaminari lamented, and of all the girls, you're dating the most innocent one. Diamond Bakugo. Already the second day and he poaches one of the cuter girls. Mineta cursed under his breath. The other boys were either uninterested or friendly about Katsuki's revelation, though they all had to admit being curious about the dynamic of Izuka and Katsuki. A few feared that the explosive boy was potentially abusive or forcing the innocent girl, but said nothing in case Bakugo blew them up. They resolved to ask Izuka herself later. Unbeknownst to the boys, the girls were having a similar conversation as they dressed, and it had all started with a teasing comment from Jiro. So, Mirio-senpai, huh? I didn't know you had such a way with boys, Izuka. Jiro grinned, already changed thanks to the simplicity of her costume. Hey, is Mirio-senpai someone special to you? He seemed glad to see you. Toru added, also dressed, undressed, into her costume. Izuka blushed at the insinuation. No. Mirio-senpai is just my senpai. He is interned with Sir Night-Eye, who is friends with my dad, plus I healed him a lot during my training with Recovery Girl. Ah, that's a shame. Has anyone here got a boyfriend, or even had a boyfriend? Mina asked, pouting a bit. Izuka shyly raised her hand as the other girls shook their heads or replied, no, with various levels of sadness or ambivalence. They all suddenly stopped and stared at Izuka, shocked that it was the most timid girl in class that had a boyfriend. Oh wait, who? When? Ochako asked, only half in her skin-tight bodysuit. Well, it was during my mom's wedding a few years back. We'd been friends since we were born, and it just kind of grew into us going out. He didn't really ask me out, but we both knew. Besides, that's Kakin style. Izuka mumbled embarrassedly. Kakin? They all screamed, making Izuka jump and yelp in surprise. Oh wait, that guy is dating you? What the heck? Mina said, completely frozen with shock. It's surprising, Karo, but it explains why you are able to talk to him so easily. Tsuyu added. That is certainly unexpected. Please don't take offense, but with his personality and yours, he isn't forcing you or anything, right? Momo asked, nervous both for Izuka and her potential reaction. Izuka's temper flared for a moment, but she beat it back. Kakin is very nice. He curses a lot, which I don't like, and he is way too eager to fight sometimes, but he is really a good guy. He has never forced me to do anything I didn't want to do. Sorry to make such an assumption, I was just worried about you. If you two are happy together, then I'm glad. Momo smiled before trying out her nude big sister act. But if he does anything to make you cry, I'm going to make a special muzzle and cuffs to keep him quiet as the girls and Ike talks with him, okay? Heck yeah. Protect the adorable cinnamon bunny. Toru cheered. The what? Izuka squeaked, but no matter how much she begged, the other girls wouldn't explain what that meant. Did they think she looked like a bunny? Kaken called her a rabbit sometimes too, and cinnamon was his favorite sweet flavor. Was that the girl's way of being supportive? She smiled at the thought and finished changing, running to meet the rest of the class outside. Her costume was a white skin-tight bodysuit that covered her body completely, stopping at her ankles, wrists and throat. She wore knee-high boots that were colored red and equipped with metal soles and braces to support her legs. Her elbow-length fingerless gloves were of the same design, red with braces for her arms, and metal on the inside of the knuckles. Her waist was a gold belt connected to an orange-gold skirt that reached her mid-thigh, and at the back was a circular pouch, colored orange with a green leaf stitched into the lid, making it look like an orange. It was her own little tribute to Clementine Man, the hero that had died to restore her hope during her year of captivity. Izuka also wore a CHST-length shawl in the same color as her skirt. While neither the skirt nor the shawl were needed, Izuka liked them for the sake of modesty, as they covered her city and backside, which was pronounced due to the skin-tight bodysuit. On her head, Izuka wore a hairband that could be connected to special earpieces. The band was red and had two small prongs that Izuka would ignite, causing them to resemble long flaming rabbit ears, modeled after All Might's hairstyle. Her hair was tied into a ponytail with a red hair tie, and around her throat was a choker, the gift from her mother. It was pure white, with gold around the edges and a phoenix-shaped pendant that hung from the front. When the class saw it, many smiled and thought, "Adorable cinnamon bunny." With the flaming ears and the pouch on her backside looking like an orange rabbit tail, the comparison was a bit unavoidable. Katsuki blushed a bit at the costume, and All Might could barely restrain his pride, forcing himself to simply give the girl a thumbs up. With everyone now aware of the relationship between Katsuki and Izuka, they suddenly noticed that Katsuki's costume matched the color scheme of Izuka's. Katsuki wore a white V-neck tank top with a red X on the front that appeared to be made of fire. He wore white briefs with red belts that held up his white and red knee pads. His boots were also white, with red buttons and soles. Most noticeably though was his weaponry, a collection of red grenade-like objects on his waist and large red grenade-shaped gauntlets. Katsuki had chosen to forego a mask. "They're a pair," All Might thought with a grin. "Excellent costumes, everyone. Now, we'll be training in ground beta," he declared, walking the class over to the city-like training ground. It had been rapidly repaired following the entrance exams and was now in almost identical condition, though Izuka's keen eye noticed a slight difference in the skyline. "Now, I'll explain today's trial. This is going to be an attack and defend team battle. In teams of 5, you will take turns defending an area and attacking an area. At the beginning of the exercise, I will give the defending team the coordinates of a location and have you go guard it. Your goal is to maintain control of the location until time ends, or until every member of the attacking team is captured or retired. Attacking teams will be given the general location of the defense team, and from there, it is your job to locate them and capture their building by defeating or capturing every member of the defense team, or captured each control point in the building by replacing the defense flag with the attack flag." Momo hummed, "So it's like a game of capture the flag, but only one team has flags?" "Correct. Heroes are occasionally required to locate and defeat villains or secure areas with very little information beyond general area, so the attacking teams will be learning how to locate the enemy and capture key areas. On the flip side, it is possible for heroes to become besieged by enemies and have to defend a location until help can reach them, so the defense team will be learning how to do this. Naturally, both teams will be learning how to fight others with quirks." All Might smiled before showing the class a piece of paper. It was a simple diagram of the letters A, B, C, and D, arranged into a square with a red arrow pointing to the next letter and a blue arrow pointed to the previous one. So that everyone experiences both sides, each team will attack one other team and defend against yet another one. Team A will attack Team B and defend against Team D, for example. "So how do we determine the teams?" Tenya asked. "It's already decided. Your teams will be the rows you sit in class. Team A is Oyama, Ashido, Azui, Ida, and Uraraka. Team B is Ojiro, Kaminari, Kirishima, Koda, and Sato. Team C is Shoji, Jiro, Siro, Tokoyami, and Todoroki. And lastly, Team D is Hagakure, Bakugo, Midoriya, Mineta and Yaoyorozu. There will be 10 minutes between each match so the defenders can rest before having to become attackers in the next fight. All Might said, showing more diagrams that were simply the teams with childish doodles of each person on the teams surrounding the letter. Izuka hummed in thought. So there would be 4 matches: Attacker A vs Defender B, Attacker B versus Defender C, Attacker C versus Defender D and Attacker D versus Defender A. That mean Izuka would be participating in the final 2 matches, first as a defender, then as an attacker. She smiled a bit. Defending was a harder job than attacking, and it would give them an idea of what offensive strategies would work best. As she muttered to herself, Team B was given their location by All Might and the rest of the class went to the ground beta observation room to watch the match. Team A remained outside, waiting until Team B were settled before they could begin the battle. The 10 minutes before the match would start was used by all the teams to plan and get a good idea of what to do. We're lucky. Since our matches are last, we get to observe how both our opponents will fight. Momo said as their team huddled around in a corner of the observation room. Katsuki, now raring to go, smirked. Ponytail, you're a brainy type, right? Well, I'm smart. I always ranked first in exams at my old school. Momo admitted, somewhat bashfully. Then you and Izuka are our strategists. I'm the vanguard and will focus on exploding the sheet out of the enemy. Invisible, you're our scout. Grape, your support. If the enemy is being a bunch of wriggly BS us, you catch M with your quirk. Izuka, you're our emergency vanguard and healer. If these guys gang up on me, I might need your help to fight M off or heal up. Ponytail, you're our supply box. Create anything we need to blast through these sheets. Katsuki said, easily taking the role of leader. One of the lessons he'd learned from Izuka's kidnapping and built upon in the training with Izuka and All Might was that NO1 was invincible and NO1 was useless. Using everything at your disposal is the best way to not only win, but secure an easy, crushing victory. And to Katsuki, crushing your opponent completely even when they tried their best was the sweetest kind of victory. Hey, you should really try to remember our names. Toru protested, but the plan is good. While I agree with Toru, it might be good to have code names for this. Izuka smiled. What should we go with? Hot Stud is me, Double D is Yaoyorozu, Cute but is Midoriya, Floating Panties is Hagakure, Blasty is Bakugo. Mineta announced. Momo frowned and covered her cheek, while Izuka squeaked and hid behind the taller girl. Toru was growling like an angry cat and Katsuki looked ready to punt the pervy little sheet into the sun. Beach, I will end you. Katsuki growled, barely restraining himself from attacking. How about we use animals? Toru can be chameleon, Kaken can be lion, Momo can be owl, Mineta can be spider and I'll be rabbit. Izuka offered, hoping to draw attention away from killing Mineta and her apparently cute backside. I agree with that. Momo smiled, but why owl and spider? Momo understood the others, but not those two. Well, owls are symbols of wisdom, and since you're really smart, it suits you. And spiders trap their prey with sticky traps, so it matches Mineta. Their conversation was cut short by All Might announcing that the first match was beginning. Izuka and her team gathered around the monitor to watch Teams A and B fight for control of a building, which was somewhat modeled on a small hospital. The building had 5 floors and control flags were set up in the 2 wards, the operating theater, the pediatric ward and the director's office. Team B, consisting of Ojiro, Kaminari, Kirishima, Koda and Sato, was the only all-boy team and was also the least diverse in abilities, with almost all of them revolving around combat. The only exceptions was Ojiro using his tail for maneuverability and Koda's control of animals. As attackers, Team B would have a strong time, but as defenders, they were in their element. Katsuki watched as Team A carefully explored the area, trying to determine which building was the important one. None of them had detection-style quirks, so their scouting was limited to Ida running fast and Azui climbing around on the walls. Uraraka was also lifting a Shido with her quirk, but they were slower than the other 2 thanks to the drawback of Uraraka's quirk. Suddenly, Katsuki's eyes flickered to the birds. They were behaving oddly, following the attackers and occasionally flying back to the hospital building. That animal guy is using the birds as scouts, right? Katsuki muttered, only Izuka close enough to hear. Yeah. In an urban area, birds are the most common animal, bad for combat, but great scouts as no one pays much attention to them. Izuka replied. Apparently, Tsuyu had come to the same conclusion, and thanks to spotting a bird flying into the hospital, she was able to correctly assume which building was guarded. She warned her team over their earpieces, and Team A converged in an alley beside the hospital. Once gathered, Tsuyu clung to the walls and climbed around the building, carefully peeking into the windows and discovering where each of the enemy team members were, as well as the locations of the flags. Each of the Team B members was guarding one of the flags, with Koda in the director's office since it was the hardest to reach and he was the only source of scouting. Unfortunately for Team A, the birds had warned Team B and now they were on guard. Kaminari suddenly jumped out of the building and shot a massive discharge aimed at the whole of Team A. His electricity managed to zap Tsuyu, who was left unconscious, but Tenya was able to escape with Ochako and Mina, while Aoyama had luckily avoided it due to rocketing himself away with his laser. Kaminari's attack was intended to disable the whole team, so he had used all his juice, rendering him stupid alongside the stunned Tsuyu. Tenya slapped the capture tape over his wrists and the group invaded the hospital, using Ochako to float each of them up to the top floor. Koda and his flag were easily captured by Tenya's speed, and following that, the rest of Team B were soon captured. Sato used too much sugar and crashed before being able to do anything but swing wildly at the acrobatic Mina. Ojiro put up a good fight, but Aoyama was able to blast him with his laser, leaving him dazed for long enough for Ochako to use the capture tape. Kirishima was the last one to fall, but in the end he couldn't simultaneously defend against lasers, Tenya's strong legs, or the chunks of concrete melted out of the walls and dropped on his head by Mina and Ochako. Team B is unable to continue. Team A is the victor, All Might announced. Both teams returned to the observation room, Tsuyu and Kaminari being carried as they hadn't recovered yet. As soon as they arrived, Izuka set to work healing them, easily restoring Tsuyu and those with combat injuries. It was a bit harder to heal Kaminari's overloaded brain, Ochako's nausea and Aoyama's stomach pain, since they weren't normal conditions, but as they were still physical effects, Izuka was ultimately able to fix them. Thank you for that, young Midoriya. Now, who can tell me the MVP of the attackers and the defenders? All Might grinned. The most effective defender was definitely Koda. Kyoka answered, making the quiet boy blush and wave his hands shyly. His quirk kept the defenders clued into what was happening. Without him, the defenders would have had no chance. Correct. Well said, young Jiro. Young Koda, you were instrumental to your team and it was an ingenious use of your quirk. Well done. Now, what about the MVP attacker? The pro asked. That would be Ida. Momo said, he was the most versatile, scouting and attacking, plus it was only thanks to him that 80% of his team wasn't knocked out by Kaminari's suicide attack. He protected his teammates while also fighting the enemy. Tenya puffed up with pride, smiling widely as All Might nodded and approved of Momo's answer. Well done. Now, Team B will be swapping to the role of attackers. Team C, here is your location. Go prepare while Team B rests up. All Might ordered, handing a slip of paper to Tokoyami and sending the team on its way. As the 10 minutes went, Team D gathered around again. So, we have to attack those guys. What do you think? Mineta asked. With Mina and Aoyama, they have a lot of destructive power. Tenya is strong too, but he relies on speed more than power. Ochako is a utility player, but we don't know much about Tsuyu's combat prowess thanks to Kaminari. Stealth seems to be her most dangerous feature, Izuka said, slowly devolving into mumbles as she went. Glasses will need to be slowed down so I can punch him. Owl, you think you can make caltrops and tripwires? Katsuki asked. I can. They're not very strong. I can also make us some shields to defend against Aoyama's laser, but Mina's acid is another story. I have no clue what it's made of or the limits of what it can melt through. Momo said, looking frustrated with herself. Punching Pinky is going to be a pain in the butt. Rabbit, think you can kick her butt? Katsuki looked to his girlfriend. Izuka just nodded with a smile, confident she could win. Before any more plans could be made, the next round began with Team B attacking Team C. Team C was protecting what looked like a bank, with control points in the vault, 2 offices, bank floor and on the roof. The match began as Izuka predicted it would, with Koda using his birds to find the other team. Jiro and Shoji of Team C were using their own abilities to detect them through the use of super hearing, but the moment they reported the locations of Team B, the match essentially ended. Todoroki walked out to where Team B had gathered and in an instant, he froze the entire enemy team and a good chunk of the surrounding area in a thick layer of ice, leaving only their heads exposed. With no way to free themselves, Team B was forced to surrender, furious at having lost both rounds. Katsuki, not taking his eyes off the screen, spoke to Izuka, "Half and half is yours. If he freezes me before I can work up a sweat, I won't be able to escape, so we'll need you to fry his butt?" Izuka gulped and nodded. "Why yeah, but still, Todoroki's power is scarily strong. Momo, do you think you can make something to help everyone else deal with the ice?" Momo nodded. "I can produce a flamethrower, though it's small. I can also make spikes to go over your shoes to stop you slipping." Teams B and C returned to the rest of the class and All Might patted the boys of Team B on the "But you did well and tried your best. You simply came up against an unfortunate matchup. Remember this for next time," the hero praised, trying to cheer them up. "So, it's probably a bit pointless to ask, but who were the MVPs? Koda and Todoroki." Koda was the only attacker that actually had a chance to act, and Todoroki basically took out the whole opposing team in an instant. Tenya explained. Secretly, he was happy that his Team A was the only team that wouldn't have to face off with Todoroki's group. All Might nodded in agreement, right? Now Team D is the defending team and Team C will attack. "You've got 10 minutes to get to your location and set up for the defense," he said, handing a note with the location to Katsuki, who had become the leader of the group. Katsuki stared at the note for a moment, then smirked and led his team out of the observation room. Team D's building was actually a construction site, with only a concrete shell of a building, an on-site office, some portable bathrooms and a large crane. The control points were all out in the open, making it easy for the attackers to see where they were, as well as where the defenders were. All Might had given Team D the toughest place to defend. "Rabbit Owl, got any plans?" Katsuki asked, slouching against a concrete pillar beside the control point of the building. "I've got a good idea of what the enemy is doing. Kyoka and Shoji are the main scouts and can locate us from a distance, but that's somewhat nullified by the open nature of this area. We're so easy to see, making such powers kind of irrelevant. Still, we'll need to take them down from a distance to allow Toru to move without detection." Izuka began. "Siro's tape will also prove a problem, as it gives him great 3D maneuverability and long-range capture. Tokoyami's Dark Shadow is likely to be the least effective of their combat forces, but in the shade he'll get stronger. Then there's Todoroki." Momo nodded. "I can nullify Kyoka, if I have some help from Lion." Toru jumped up and down. "Momo, make me a taser and I'll take out Siro." Momo agreed and created a small taser that was packing a lot of power, easily enough to knock out a full-grown man. "Shoji's also going to be really strong, so it would be best to catch him quickly." "Spider, do you think you could do that?" Izuka asked, looking to Mineta. "Heck yeah. It doesn't matter how strong he is if he can't move a muscle. Get me within a few meters of him and I'll make him look like grape jelly," the tiny pervert cheered. "That leaves us. Bird Boy gets weaker with light, right? I'll use some flashbang explosions and kick his butt. Rabbit, take down half and half." Katsuki ordered, cracking his knuckles. Izuka smiled. "Okay, I know what to do. Here's the plan." Minutes later, the start siren went off and Team C entered the area and began to search. They entered the block through an alleyway closest to the observation point, just as predicted, and walked unnoticed by a small speaker. The moment Kyoka was right beside it, Izuka, who was flying above with some binoculars, signaled Momo. Momo suched on the megaphone in her hand and held it between Katsuki and a microphone, just as Katsuki let loose the loudest explosion he could manage. The sound, amplified by the megaphone, traveled from the microphone to the speaker, set at max volume, and blasted out throughout the alleyway, stunning the whole team and making both Shoji and Kyoka scream from the pain. At that instant, with the whole team distracted, Izuka slammed down and knocked Kyoka out, wrapping her wrists in capture tape and flying away again before Dark Shadow could grab her. Target 1 is down. Enter Phase 2. Izuka said. Team C looked at their unconscious and captured teammate with shock, but after ensuring she was safe, they pressed on. With their main detector knocked out, the whole team was on high alert, with Shiro watching the skies carefully in case Izuka made another surprise attack. Shoji decided it was safer to focus on fighting than detecting, so he sucked all his extra limbs to hands and walked at the front of the group, using himself as a shield. Team C continued into the opening, and using the smoke from Katsuki's earlier explosion, headed towards the construction site. Izuka watched carefully from her hiding place on a nearby roof, Mineta beside her as they waited for their chance. Shoji walked at the front of the line, Tokoyami at the back and Todoroki and Shiro side by side. Once Team C were in the construction site, Shiro noticed the capture point in the control booth of the crane, and as it was easy for him to reach, he pulled himself up there with some tape, but just as he entered the booth, Toru tasked him, having been lying in wait for him. Target 2 is down. Toru chirped. Unfortunately, Todoroki was less than pleased and froze the entire crane, capturing both Toru and the control point in the process. Izuka watched with a frown. Chameleon is down, but Todoroki is away from the group. Lion, prepare for the bombing run. Katsuki grinned and burst out from his hiding place in the on-site office, triggering a huge flashbang explosion right in the faces of both Tokoyami and Shoji. Dark Shadow shrieked and recoiled as both students were temporarily blinded. Clear for the bombing run. I'm heading to the end point. Katsuki smirked. Izuka grabbed Mineta and took flight, flying directly over the two blinded attackers. Mineta laughed maniacally as he threw dozens of his pop-off ball at the two, sticking them together and locking their movements completely. Izuka dropped Mineta on them as he could bounce from his own ball, allowing him to easily put the capture tape on Shoji and Tokoyami, leaving only Todoroki free. The boy came charging in seconds later and captured Mineta in ice before he could escape, but Izuka was able to retreat to the end point where Momo and Katsuki waited for her. With an irritated sigh, Todoroki unleashed as much ice as he could, blanketing the area in ice and essentially capturing the whole place. He listened to his earpiece as the capture of the points by the office, portable bathrooms and roof of the building were announced, but not the final point or any of the defenders. Frowning, Todoroki carefully worked his way to the final control point in the middle of the concrete building, only to pause with widening eyes when he discovered it. The point was guarded by Yaoyorozu, Bakugo and Midoriya, and a ring of fire was completely surrounding them, stopping his ice from getting within 3 feet of the fire. The ring of fire was so powerful, there was no way he could breach it, so Todoroki blasted as much ice as he could, as cold as he could, directly into the flames closest to Midoriya in hopes of trapping her. A burst of flames ended that idea and Midoriya flew at him, engaging in hand-to-hand combat with him. Izuka and Todoroki fought with martial arts for a few moments, both surprised at the strength and skill of the other. For Izuka, Todoroki seemed so calm and cool, so it was amazing that he could fight so ferociously, and for Todoroki, Izuka looked way too small to be whipping out some of the powerful blows she was using. Just as Izuka went to throw a knockout punch, Todoroki felt a horrible spark going up his left side and he shot himself backward, his entire left side ablaze, destroying the ice covering of his costume. The fire girl paused, momentarily surprised. I thought so, you're Shoto Todoroki, son of Enji Todoroki, also known as Endeavor. I had a feeling you had fire as well. Don't bring that BS Stardy into this. Todoroki roared, forcefully dousing his own flames and countering with a wave of ice. Izuka ignited her body, making the ice melt before it even touched her. I apologize, I didn't mean to cause you trouble, she said, not leaving her combat stance. I guess you don't like Endeavor? I won't ask why, that's not my business, but isn't it silly to only use half your quirk? With fire and ice, you'd be nearly unstoppable. It's none of your business, Todoroki said, his voice going from raging to icy in an instant. Izuka frowned. There was something else going on here. She didn't want to upset Todoroki, but it was a hero's job to butt into others' problems. Deciding to try and talk to him later, Izuka activated Phoenix Shroud and pounced on Todoroki, smashing apart his hasty ice shield and knocking him out with a punch to his left side, which he couldn't defend without using his fire. Izuka sighed. By not using his fire, Todoroki was not only limiting himself, he was also creating a potentially dangerous blind spot in his defense. All members of Team C have been captured or rendered unable to continue. Team D wins. All Might announced over the speakers. Head on back. Young Midoriya, if you don't mind, please see to any injuries. Izuka nodded, and as her team gathered the defeated attackers, she ran about healing them. Kyoka had just a bump on the head and some damage to her hearing, but that was easily fixed. Shiro simply needed waking up, and the trapped duo of Shoji and Tokoyami were healthy, if disappointed. Todoroki refused treatment altogether, almost slapping Izuka when he regained consciousness to find her pressing pink flames to his face to heal the bruise from her punch. He apologized, but it took every other member of Team C and D to stop Katsuki from attacking the boy. When they all got back to the observation room, Katsuki and Izuka smiled at All Might, desperately trying to restrain himself from hugging them. The pride in his eyes was unmistakable. "So, who were the MVPs?" he asked. "Well, for the attackers it was Todoroki again. He was the only one who had a chance to do anything, kind of like Koda in our match." Ojiro answered. "Shiro helped too, but he ended up rushing in and getting knocked out." Shiro shrugged, sighing with disappointment. He hadn't expected the invisible girl to be waiting for him. "And what about the defenders?" All Might asked, but unlike in previous matches, the class looked a bit puzzled. "It's really strong. Everyone on their team did something. Momo made the speaker and stuff to take out Kyoka, Toru took down Shiro, Bakugo blinded Tokoyami and Shoji, Mineta tied M up, and Izuka took out the trapped and distracted enemies, as well as defending against Todoroki," Ochako said, offering her own commentary. "I think it was Izuka," Tsuyu said decisively. "She was instrumental to taking down 4 of the 5 attackers, and without her, Todoroki would have captured them all." Momo nodded in agreement while Izuka spluttered in surprise. "The whole thing was her plan too. She knew what the attackers would do and had us all in position." Izuka looked desperately to the rest of her team, but all of them, even Kaken, was smirking at her, agreeing with Momo's assessment. All Might laughed at her reaction. "You shouldn't be so afraid of praise. It is a sign that you're earning the affection of your classmates, and in the future, the people too." "Okay, I'm just not used to it," Izuka weakly replied, poking her fingers together. Todoroki watched her reactions closely, seeing how she acted around All Might and how proud All Might looked when he looked at Izuka. Her strength was also similar, and the way Izuka went from shy to fierce in combat. Was the sweetness just an act, or was that the real Izuka? Todoroki gripped his left arm tightly. He would find out. Team A left shortly afterwards to set up the defense for the final match, leaving Team D to plan their attack. As Team D walked to the battle area to await the start of the match, Mineta grinned up at Izuka. "So, Midoriya, got another amazing plan?" he asked. With heavy hitters like Bakugo and Midoriya on the team, as well as the appealing Yaoyorozu and Peppy Hagakure, Mineta hadn't expected to get any action or recognition, and having Midoriya actively involve him in a plan had boosted his confidence a fair bit. He also couldn't deny how great it felt to have the girl carrying him as they flew over the battlefield for the bombing run. Izuka hummed. "Well, Team C was definitely a power team, but Team A is more about fast, but devastating attacks. Plus, with Ochako and Tsuyu, we can't be sure where the enemy will pop up during our attack. Don't think about it." Katsuki grinned sadistically. "I'm taking the lead this time." "Fair enough. I'll follow your orders." Izuka chirped, happy to not be the center of attention again. This was part of the deal with Kaken. When it came to attacking, it was all him, while she handled defending. "I'll WHP up some caltrips. Shitty spider, stick a ton of the caltrips to those ball of yours. You're demon useless in a fight, so use 'em to try and slow down Glasses and Froggy. I'll handle kicking the CRP out of Glasses and Frenchie. Chameleon, scout and try and lead Glasses to shitty spider's traps. Rabbit, fly Owl and yourself to the top of the building and attack from there, while I attack from the bottom. We'll crush them in a pincer attack, Katsuki declared as they reached the battle area. The defense zone was a simple apartment building with capture points on the roof, in the landlord's office and in 3 different apartments. Every apartment had a balcony, so access from the sky was easy, but predictable. As ordered, Momo created a burlap sack and a huge amount of caltrops, as well as 2 spools of metallic wire. Mineta took the wire and then began filling the sack with his pop-off ball, all of which were first covered in the caltrops. Once the bag was full, Izuka took Mineta and dropped him off on the 3rd floor of the apartment building before grabbing Momo and heading for the roof. Once Mineta and the girls were in position, Toru began scouting the building while Katsuki waited impatiently in the shadows outside the building. Toru carefully crept through the halls, noticing several areas where the floors were covered with acid. The floors weren't melting, so the acid wasn't potent, but it would still sting like crazy if she stepped in it, so she moved carefully. Turning a corner, she spotted Tsuyu clinging to a wall, hiding in the shadow of an open door that led to a stairwell. Tsuyu is on the 1st floor, guarding the stairwell. Toru whispered. Katsuki nodded. Unless you can take her out in one blow, ignore her and move to the next level. Toru quietly regretted that she couldn't bring a weapon. As it was, she had to run about naked just so she wouldn't be seen. A floating weapon was too obvious. Successfully sneaking past Tsuyu, Toru continued her scouting until she reached the roof and quietly acknowledged the hiding Izuka and Momo. Speaking to the whole team via the earpiece, Toru reported, Ida is patrolling the 3rd floor. The apartment walls have been melted by Mina so he can freely run around and protect one of the control points. Spider has nowhere to hide if he enters the apartments. Also, Mina is protecting the 2nd floor, while Aoyama and Ochako are protecting the 4th floor. Ochako was doing something with a bunch of mirrors from the apartments. He's probably going to use it to let Frenchie reflect his laser. Shitty Spider, trap the sheet out of the area you're in. When you're done, let us know. Katsuki ordered. Mineta muttered to himself but got to work. It probably hadn't been his best idea to point out to the really dangerous boy that his girlfriend had a great butt. By the time the bag of traps was empty, the hallway was riddled with spiky ball and tripwires. Mineta had been ingenious in how he laid them out, carefully hiding the tripwires so they were concealed against the lines where 2 floor tiles met. Some of the lines were connected on either end to spike ball, so when tripped, the ball would catch the person's legs. Mineta had even made several traps obvious, to purposely draw attention away from the really dangerous ones. It's done, he whispered urgently. Good. Now everyone brace yourselves, I'm gonna have some fun. Katsuki roared and charged at the building. He blasted straight in and headed for the stairwell, not letting on that he knew Tsuyu was there. As he passed the door, he put a hand on it and blew the wood to pieces, sending a smoking Tsuyu clambering down the hall with a startled croak. In an attempt to counterattack, Tsuyu drew the capture tape and shot her tongue at Katsuki, but he easily sidestepped the appendage and grabbed it, releasing a very light explosion to stun the frog girl, before pulling her towards him and punching her strong in the gut. Tsuyu was winded long enough for Katsuki to grab her arm and slam her over his head and into the ground front first. Gripping her other arm, Katsuki bound Tsuyu with the same capture tape she had gotten out for him. Froggy's down. Moving up. Katsuki grinned. Call me Tsuyu, the girl said, nonplussed. Katsuki just smirked at her and moved upward. He found Mina quickly, or rather, she found him as she attempted to melt the stairs to stop him climbing up. She would have succeeded, but at the last moment, Katsuki used his explosions as a boost to launch himself upward, headbutting Mina in the process. The girl dropped, holding her forehead in pain, not even noticing as Katsuki slapped the capture tape around her wrists. Above him, Momo and Izuka were making their way down to the 4th floor, when they were suddenly forced to dodge a laser shot that came from around the corner, deflected by a common bathroom mirror. The beam just barely caught Izuka's hand, making her cry out in pain and surprise. It actually burned her. Izuka had long forgotten what it felt like to be burned and was now remembering how much it se. Still, at least now she knew that lasers could burn her. Are you all right? Momo asked, creating a mirror to reflect any further shots. I'm good, just caught me a bit. Move forward, I'll heal as I go. Izuka said, her hand already covered in pink flame. Momo's shield blocked several more shots, until Izuka shoved her out of the way of a sofa that was launched with Ochako's quirk. Izuka blasted the flying furniture with several phoenix feathers, then ran forward, using her acrobatics to slide between Aoyama's legs, grab his cape then flip over him, covering his face and allowing her to easily knock him out. Momo took the opportunity to create a bow staff and charge Ochako, lightly swatting her hands as the gravity girl tried to touch some more furniture, before sweeping her legs out from under her. "Sorry, Ochako," Izuka yelled before using her strength to flip the sofa Ochako had landed on, pinning the girl beneath it and allowing Momo to capture her. With Aoyama and all the girls on Team A caught, as well as 4 of the 5 capture points taken by Team D, only Tenya and the final point remained, but he was stubbornly staying beside it. Both Toru and Mineta tried to taunt him, but he refused to leave his post and would simply charge at whoever came close, until the capture point was nearly out of view, at which point he'd immediately return. "We've got a DMN problem. Glasses won't leave the FA point," Katsuki growled. "Well, it makes sense. Whether we beat him or make him leave the point, we win the match. He's improving his odds by staying in a battleground he's familiar with. We may need to resort to force," Izuka replied. Toru suddenly giggled. "I have an idea. Momo, do you think you can make me a copy of Ochako's costume? And a brown wig?" she asked, putting her gloves on. Momo smirked. "It won't be the right material or have the right features, but it should physically look like it," she replied, knowing where the invisible girl was going with this. She created the costume and wig and Toru promptly put it on, making her look like Ochako with an invisible face. With a dash of dust to color the visor of the helmet to obscure her features and some powder from Momo to color her hands, Toru added an earpiece she took from Ochako and moved out into the open, where Ida could see her. "Ida," she yelled, her voice croaky. "Uraraka. What happened? Why does your voice sound like that?" Ida asked, on guard. "That JRK Bakugu sent a bunch of explosions to the upper floors. I accidentally breathed in a ton of smoke. Izuka and Momo are raging around on the upper floor, trying to find the point through the smoke, and I can't handle it alone. My voice hurts, hold on." Toru made a show of coughing horrendously, then talking into her earpiece. "Sorry, it's easier to whisper through the earpieces." Ida relaxed. "Darn it. I shall head up to the upper floor. Uraraka, please stay and defend this point." Toru saluted and walked over to the point, but right before she could capture it, Katsuki whispered into the earpiece from her own team, "Don't you dare. I want to fight this robo-bastard." Toru gulped and promptly stayed still as Tenya left the room. He immediately saw Mineta and charged him, causing the grape gremlin to run around the corner, leading Tenya successfully into the trapped hallway. As Mineta knew where all the traps were, he successfully avoided them as Tenya charged full speed into them. He tripped the first 3 tripwires without slowing, only to have their combined lengths tangling his legs and causing several spiky balls to stab into him. Thankfully, his armor was thick enough that he wasn't hurt, but unfortunately, a couple of the ball had gotten stuck on the exhausts on his armor, stopping him from freely using his quirk. From there, it was a sure victory. Katsuki blasted through the wall and grabbed the immobilized Ida, exploding his helmet and then flinging the taller boy clear across the floor, making him slam into the flagpole. Toru took the opportunity to remove the fake Ochako helmet and bonk Ida over the head with it, stunning him so Katsuki could capture him right as Mineta ran in and took the last capture point. Amazing! Team D successfully defeated all defenders and captured all the capture points. A decisive victory for Team D. All Might announced, "Head back as soon as you can," he said, not bothering to tell Izuka to heal them. He already knew she would. After a round of healing, the group headed back and joined the others. The class assembled outside the training ground, as it was almost the end of the day. "Well done, everyone. You all worked very strong today. Before we wrap up, who can give me the MVPs for the final match?" Ida was definitely it for Team A. Kirishima said with a grin, slinging an arm around the taller boy's shoulders. He kept to his post and only left when he thought he had back up. "It was pretty manly." Hagakure was it for Team D. Todoroki said, speaking for the first time without first being asked. Her scouting enabled all of Team D's plans, and her quick thinking in impersonating Uraraka allowed her to easily resolve the issue with Ida not leaving his post. Correct, both of you. Though I do have to say, young Hagakure, your tactic was a bit reckless. You covered yourself well, using the dust to cover your visor, the excuse of smoke to explain your different voice and the use of Team A's earpiece to legitimize yourself, but you also made a crucial mistake that thankfully, young Ida didn't notice. Young Midoriya, can you explain? Izuka blushed at being called out, but answered regardless. The earpieces announce when a point is captured or when a defender or attacker is forced to retire. If Tenya had stopped to think first, he'd have noticed that Ochako had already been announced as caught, and the capture point on that floor was taken. Darn. My concern for Uraraka blinded me to the truth. Tenya scolded himself. All Might nodded, but patted the boy's head. Concern for a teammate is never a bad thing, but you should be careful not to let it cloud your judgment. In battle, even the smallest detail can be the difference between victory and defeat. Now, congratulations to everyone here who won, and good luck in the future to those that came up short, but to all of you, I say well done. Keep working strong. I can already see you'll be splendid heroes. Go change, then you can head home if you like, he grinned. The class cheered and made their way to the changing rooms. As she passed, All Might took Izuka's hand and leaned down. You did wonderfully today, my girl. I'm proud of you, he said, ruffling Izuka's hair as she blushed. Just a short ways away, Todoroki stood with his back to the wall, out of view of the two. He had confirmed the connection between Izuka and All Might. Now he just had to determine the nature of the connection. Elsewhere, in a dingy bar, deep within the confines of Kamino Ward, two figures sat around a newspaper. The headline proclaimed All Might's teaching position at UDA, and in the article, several of the notable students were listed as attending, such as Endeavor's son, Ingenium's younger brother, the daughter of a high-ranking government official, and Izuka Midoriya. The first man, made entirely of mist, passed the paper to the other. Have you seen this? He's become a teacher, and our little rebel is attending. The other man, a pale, disembodied hand covering his face, touched the paper, making it decay. Say, what do you think would happen if the symbol of peace was snuffed out by villains? The man smiled creepily behind the hand and held up a small Polaroid picture of a terrified little 9-year-old girl with green hair and shining eyes. You'll be back in your rightful home soon, little bird. The next day, Izuka arrived at UDA with Katsuki, finding it besieged by reporters. The entire main gate was blocked by the mass of news people, with everything from major TV crews to independent publications represented. Several students were struggling their way through the crowd, being badgered by questions as they went. Oh, what the F dash? Katsuki growled. What do they want? Did something happen? Izuka asked worriedly. As they approached, the reason for the press presence became clear: All Might. They were all asking about All Might. News of him being a teacher at UI must have spread. Several 1A students were caught in the crowd, trying to deal with the sudden questioning they were enduring. One reporter was talking to a flustered Ochako. What are your thoughts on having the number 1 hero as a teacher? He's really muscly? I'm sorry, we've only had one class, she said, running into the school. Another was being talked to death by Ida, who was taking a rather simple question and using a whole speech to answer it. The reporter looked to regret asking the proper boy. Izuka almost fainted when a reporter spotted her and Kaken and ran over. Hey, what do you think of all wait? Aren't you Izuka Midoriya from the Monkalama incident? The lady reporter was so loud that it alerted the whole mob, and Izuka was soon panicking as she was surrounded and hundreds of questions were screamed at her by the overeager news people. Katsuki saw her paling and her shoulders beginning to shake, making him growl angrily. Throwing a hand into the air, he released a massive explosion, causing the reporters to scurry backwards, shrieking and shouting at Katsuki. What the F are you sheets doing? Don't harass her, you sheets! Katsuki roared, gripping Izuka's hand and leading her into the school grounds. Once they were safely over the threshold, Kaken released Izuka, and the girl turned and bowed to the assembled press. I'm sorry about that. Kaken is very protective and I get nervous in crowds. Please forgive us, she called, before running into the building with her boyfriend. Aizawa chose that moment to appear and promptly told the press to leave. "Get out of here. You're disturbing classes and harassing students," he said coldly. He was normally neutral to the press, since he was an unknown, but seeing how close Izuka came to a panic attack made him lose what patience for them he had. He didn't bother to wait for a response, instead opting to ferry the few student stragglers into the school before turning his back on the mob completely. Aizawa ignored their calls and even a few blatant insults, but it was all worth it to hear the loud clang of the Yuta barrier and the accompanying shrieks of a reporter that had thought to test the school's defenses. With the school secure, Aizawa slowly wandered to his class, thinking over the evaluations he'd received from the combat trial. If any student was asked about Aizawa's teaching methods, they'd be described as harsh and unforgiving, with an eagerness to expel students that fail to meet his expectations. But if one was to ask a teacher, they'd describe the man as flexible. Aizawa was a cool and relaxed individual that liked to take things easy, but he also had the attitude of someone who would rather do a thorough job than half-but things. It was with this attitude that he mused over how to further advance his students. Each one had both strengths and flaws, which would require unique handling. He had already decided how he'd handle a few individuals like Koda and Midoriya, the former of which was just too shy and the latter was too self-sacrificing, but at least they were both reasonable. The problems would be Bakugo and Todoroki. Aizawa had heard from both All Might and Izuka just how stubborn Bakugo could be. It had taken his only real friend being kidnapped for him to get his act together as much as it was. He shuddered to think of what the boy would be like if Izuka wasn't around to ground him. But Todoroki, that was a whole other can of worms. Naturally, Aizawa knew about Todoroki's true quirk, namely half hot and half cold, and had a limited idea as to why Todoroki refused to use it, but it created an issue regardless. Whatever his reasons, Todoroki was going through class with only half of his power, determined to reach number 1 with just ice. Aizawa, as both a teacher and a hero, could not allow that. He hated the thought of all his students trying their best and being so easily swept aside by a kid that was literally half-butting his way through the course. Not only that, but if Todoroki never accepted his fire side, then if a situation arises where he needs it and refuses to use it, it could kill him or someone else. Compounding this problem was the fact that the only person in class that could successfully counter his ice, namely Midoriya, was also completely immune to fire, so it wouldn't even make sense for Todoroki to use it against her. The underground hero needed to think on this more. If Todoroki hadn't turned around by the summer break, Aizawa would speak with Nizu about moving him to another course. The world didn't need an unstable hero that rejected half of himself. It may seem cruel, but Aizawa didn't want anyone to be hurt by the boy's half-hearted efforts, least of all the boy himself. Stepping into the classroom, he found the class sat waiting for him. Aizawa-sensei sighed and put his papers down on the desk. "I hope you've rested from yesterday's combat trial. I looked through your scores." He suched his gaze to Koda. "Koda, you did well. Work on your confidence a bit and you'll go far as a hero. Fighting isn't all there is to heroism after all." Koda smiled and made a sign with his hands that Aizawa recognized as thank you. The boy still wasn't willing to talk much. Oh well, Aizawa would slowly encourage him. The teacher turned his attention to all of Koda's row: Ojiro, Kaminari, Kirishima, Sato. The 4 of you along with Koda weren't able to win either match. Think over your mistakes. I'll expect some improvement from each of you. "Yes, sensei," the 4 boys shouted, pumped up for whatever the next trial would be. Aizawa then looked to Team D. "Team D, you did very well, winning both matches. I can't do much to fault your performance, though I bet you've already figured out what mistakes you did make," he said, looking between the 5 students with only a raised eyebrow. He noticed Midoriya flinch a bit as he focused on her and decided to say his next piece a bit more gently. "Midoriya, your healing is a great help, but I want you to limit it to healing serious or long-term injuries in future. Little bumps and bruises can be taken care of by Recovery Girl or left alone. You aren't responsible for keeping your classmates in one piece," he said. Aizawa had watched the tapes of the matches and had noticed Izuka was fairly pale at the very end, likely on the verge of weakening from using too much BLD in healing. "That goes for the rest of you too," he said, looking across the classroom. "Midoriya isn't your personal medic or required to clean up after your mistakes. Her healing quirk consumes her BLD, and I know for a fact she's too soft to refuse if you ask her, so for the sake of her health and my sanity, don't ask her for healing unless it's necessary. And if your injury is self-inflicted, then you can deal with it yourself." His eyes flicked towards Sato as he said that, and the sweet loving boy had the good sense to look ashamed of himself. Moving on. Aizawa looked to Katsuki. "Bakugo, you need to calm down. You've got talent, certainly, but no civilian is going to trust in a hero that terrifies them. You need more than power to reach the #1 spot." Katsuki frowned, averting his eyes for a moment. "I'll work on it," he said shortly. Katsuki knew he wasn't exactly Mr. Personality, but he still didn't like having his failures pointed out. Aizawa looked around the class, choosing not to address Todoroki yet. That was best done in private. He was satisfied. Everyone looked either enthusiastic or pensive regarding their previous performance, and that was enough for him. So long as his students were considering their actions, he would trust them to find their own way with just a little prodding. "Now let's get on with homeroom. I hate to spring this on you, but it's about that time." Aizawa began, looking serious. The class gulped. Was this going to be another succeeded or expelled test? "We need to pick our class council." The class exploded into uproar, both excited and angry over their teacher's cryptic way of speaking. Aizawa just blinked. "Whatever. We need a president, vice president, and representative. The president will be in charge of the class. The vice president will be second in command and double as a secretary. The representative will be the go-between for the rest of the class, as well as the other class councils across the campus. All three will be a part of the student government," he explained, reading from a crib sheet that Izuka recognized as being in Nizu's handwriting. Oh, I want to be class president. Pick me." Kirishima yelled as he and most of the class raised a hand or outright leaped to their feet. "The position exists for me," Aoyama said confidently. "Like a leader position. I'll do it." Me, Mina added. "I want to do it too," Jiro said, more neutrally than the others. "My manifesto as president, all girls must expose 30 centimeters of thigh." Mineta shouted over the cacophony. Izuka squeaked in embarrassment. She was so small that 30 centimeters of thigh was pretty much her entire thigh. She'd be wearing little more than a long belt. Izuka was actually one of the few not raising her hand. She had no longing to be a leader, especially since she had always been under the impression that she'd end up working with Katsuki, who would be in charge. The noise was suddenly silenced by Ida's voice shouting, "Be quiet," over the crowd. The class turned back to look at the boy, his gaze as serious as ever. "This is a task for only the most responsible, where one must be able to carry everyone's weight, not just your own. Wanting to do it doesn't mean you can. It is a position of great esteem, broadcasting to others that you have the trust of your colleagues. The only true leader is one elected by the people. We must settle this with a vote," Ida declared, his passionate words somewhat lessened by him straining to heave his hand up as high and as straight as possible. "It's a good idea, but we've only known each other for 3 days. We haven't had a chance to get to know everyone or build that kind of trust." "So you said?" "Yeah, and pretty much everyone will just vote for themselves," Kirishima added. "Well, we could always make it so you can't vote for yourself," Izuka offered. "We'll make it a public vote then. We put all our names on the board and one by one, we go up and put a tally beside the person we want to vote for. If you can't publicly stand beside your chosen candidate, then it shows you don't really trust them," Ida said, turning to Aizawa. "Is that all right, sensei?" "As long as you're done by the end of homeroom, then do whatever," the man replied, already tucking himself into his sleeping bag. Ida nodded and stood up, grabbing a piece of chalk and writing everyone's names on the blackboard. Izuka wanted to protest when her name was written, but decided against it. After all, no one but Kaken would even consider voting for her. Oh, how wrong she was. Aoyama voted for Izuka, stating her pink flames were almost as sparkling as his laser. Mina voted for Momo as she was the most responsible girl in class. Tsuyu voted for Ida, having liked his earnestness despite wanting so badly to be president. Tenya and Ochako both voted for Izuka, citing her actions during the entrance exam as the reason why. Ojiro opted for Koda, as the quiet boy had helped a lot in the previous day's trial. Kaminari voted for Ida, saying he was the most class president-like. Kirishima voted for Momo because if you discount Izuka, who Kirishima noticed didn't look happy to get votes, then Momo had scored best in the quirk test. Koda and Sato both voted Izuka, the former because she was a bit like a rabbit and he loved rabbits, and the latter due to her healing his finger. The entire Team C group voted Momo, all of them believing she was the best suited for the job, though Tokoyami also voted for her as opposed to Izuka as he felt the smaller girl was too bright for him to look at all the time. It hurt his shadowy mind. Toru voted for Izuka because of her plan leading them to victory against Todoroki. Katsuki also voted for Izuka because she was his girlfriend and the only one in class he was comfortable taking orders from. Izuka emmed and awed over her choice before settling on voting for Katsuki. She believed Ida and Momo may be better suited, but by that point, Ida was out of the running and Momo looked like she'd win anyway. Mineta voted for Momo as the most attractive girl in class. Lastly, Momo voted for Izuka, since the smaller girl was her first friend and a keen mind. The final results were 1 vote apiece for Koda and Katsuki, 2 votes for Ida, 7 votes for Momo and 9 votes for Izuka. How did I get 9 votes? Izuka exclaimed, paling at the results. It's not that surprising. Between the entrance exam, quirk apprehension test and combat trial, you've done a lot of amazing things. Momo pointed out. But I didn't even want to be a candidate. Izuka whimpered as Aizawa emerged from his cocoon/sleeping bag. Well, it looks like it's Midoriya as president and Yaoyorozu as vice president, he said, uninterestedly. It was close, but I'm glad I lost to you at least. Momo said with a smile, only making Izuka more nervous. Yes, it's all very good and whatever. Homeroom is almost over, so we'll deal with choosing a representative in the afternoon homeroom. Aizawa waved everyone back to their seats and wiped the board, ready for the day's lessons. Izuka was noticeably quiet throughout the morning lessons and the teachers frequently looked at her with concern when her distressed thoughts came out in the form of quiet mutterings as she desperately tried to work out how she'd managed as class president. In a hero situation, she was as confident as can be, fully believing in her strength, skill and healing abilities, not to mention that without the threat of death looming over her, she could act recklessly so long as it didn't cause harm to others. But in a social situation, she had no idea how to act. She let Momo and Ochako, or one of the other girls, take the lead whenever the girls hung out together, and if Katsuki was around, he'd naturally take charge and Izuka was able to act confidently by looking to him. But now the whole class would be looking to her. Lunch came all too quickly and Izuka settled down to eat with her now permanent group of friends, Katsuki, Ochako, Momo and Tenya. Momo looked around the cafeteria as they ate. People from all years and courses are here. Heroics, support, management and gen ed, all assembled in one place. Tenya nodded. The elite of our generation are gathered here. Izuka, you're one of the leaders of that generation. You should be proud, he said, picking up on the cause of Izuka's nerves. I know, but I don't think I'm up to the task. Izuka muttered between bites of rice. Sure you are. Ochako encouraged. Ochako's right. You proved your leadership abilities in the trial yesterday, Momo said with a patient smile. Inwardly, she was sighing at the low confidence of the adorable girl she'd basically adopted as a little sister. But that was different. In the field I can act fine, but in class, I just want to be another student, the green-haired girl complained. Katsuki snorted, don't be such a Deku. Everyone here voted for you, and you got 5 others to back you too. If you're only good at leading in a fight, then just imagine the class as your soldiers, and you need to WHP into shape to go slaughter the enemy. Tenya looked a bit green at that image. While I dislike his choice of wording, I agree with Bakugu's sentiments. You've got guts and good judgment, Izuka. Even if you lack confidence in a calm setting, you're the one I trust most to carry us through any danger. Didn't you want to president yourself, Ida? Ochako asked innocently. You've even got the look with those glasses. Katsuki choked on his rice. Round cheeks, you've got a hell of a weird view of things. Ida seemed to take Ochako's comment in stride. Like I said earlier, the longing to do something doesn't equal the ability to do it. I followed my own judgment on the matter. Ugh. You sound so sophisticated. Are you a rich kid like Momo? Ochako chirped. Both Momo and Tenya gave the girl a deadpan stare. With a sigh, Ida answered, I don't like drawing attention to it. Wealth and station shouldn't have any bearing on a hero. However, I am proud of my family. The Idas have been in the field of heroics for generations, almost since the founding of the Age of Heroes. I'm the second son. Have you heard of the turbo hero, Ingenium? Izuka's eyes sparkled with excitement. Of course. He's the amazing hero whose Tokyo office has hired 65 sidekicks. I have 3 pages devoted to him in my notebooks. Tenya looked proudly at the girl. I'm glad to see you're a fan of his. He's my big brother. I aspire to be just like him. He is an upstanding hero that prizes the rules and guides the people. When I think of a leader, that's the sort of person I imagine. Until I can match that image, I think it's fine that I don't take a leadership position, he said, smiling. The 3 girls stared at him. I think that's the first time I've seen you smile. Ochako exclaimed happily. I as well. It suits you rather well. Momo smiled. Izuka just beamed at the tall boy. You should smile more. It's a good smile. Katsuki's eyes narrowed and he looked at Ida for his reaction. Izuka's happy smile was enough to make a badass like him fall for her, so he had to be careful none of the extras in his class fell for her too. Thankfully, Ida just smiled again and ruffled Izuka's hair, as if she was his little sister. The explosive boy sighed and internally declared Ida safe. Suddenly, a loud siren began blaring all across campus, startling the students. The siren quieted a bit as an automated message began to play. Security level 3 has been breached. All students, please evacuate the premises. What the F dash? Izuka, what's security level 3? Katsuki demanded. Izuka frowned worriedly. Level 1 is the Udata barrier, level 2 is the outer grounds and level 3 is the inner grounds and the buildings themselves. If an intruder has made it this far, it could be really dangerous. Katsuki growled. Well, we ain't getting out through the FING door, he yelled, pointing to where the crowd was jamming the doors. People were pushing so much that those by the door were squashed against it and couldn't open them, since they opened inwards, but they couldn't communicate that over the chaos. Ida immediately tried to calm the crowd, only to get swallowed by the mob and pressed up against the windows. From his position against the glass, Ida was able to see the intruders. It was just the press. The group from this morning had managed to get in somehow, but they had already been met by present Mike and Aizawa-sensei, the pair of them looking like they were weighing the pros and cons of simply sending the reporters flying. Wait, it's nothing to worry about. It's just the press. Ida tried to shout, but like everyone else, he was drowned out by the panic. In the crowd, he could see Kirishima and Kaminari trying to slow the students and calm them down, and things were started to get dangerous as a few students fell and were nearly trampled. The people against the walls and doors were slowly having the air crushed out of them. If this continued, then in a few minutes there would be serious injuries. Suddenly, Ida felt the temperature of the room skyrocket and a loud explosion ripped through the air. Shut the F up and calm down, roared Bakugu, his hands smoking from the explosion. At his side was Izuka. Pink flames wreathed around her as she healed Ochako, whom had been knocked down and stepped on in the chaos. The rage on Bakugu's face was expected, but the calmer anger of Izuka was somehow even more unsettling. With the crowd silenced by Katsuki, Izuka stood up from healing Ochako and flared her fire shroud. Everyone be quiet and do as I say. No one can leave if you're trapping the doors shut. Back away from the doors, open them and then evacuate calmly, and if you please, try not to hurt any more of your classmates, she snarled. The students closest to her flinched at the anger of the small girl, looking less like the adorable cinnamon bunny and more like an angry angel of vengeance with her fire wings fully extended. Using the moment of calm, Ida revved himself up and charged to the front of the crowd, using Kirishima as a leg up to land against the wall above the exit, the impact leaving him in the pose of a figure on the emergency exit signs. Everyone, calm down and listen to Midoriya. Everything is fine. It's just the press. There's nothing to panic about. You're all students of the best school in the country, and yet you are panicking and hurting each other. Act like you deserve to be here, he scolded. Between Katsuki's explosive rage, Tenya's scolding explanation and Izuka's justified anger, The students were cowed and began to calmly evacuate, lifting the injured students up as they went and either helping them shake off their minor injuries or taking them to Recovery Girl. Izuka watched each one carefully, restraining herself from helping heal any of them. None needed her, and after Ochako was hurt, she was too angry to focus properly, plus Aizawa-sensei had warned her not to use her healing fire so often, especially when the wounds were self-inflicted, which they sort of were in this case. Before long, only Izuka and her 4 friends remained in the cafeteria. Tenya sighed, that could have been a lot worse. Thank you for the assist, Deku, Izuka? The girl had fallen to her knees and was struggling to breathe, her shoulders shaking like she was encased in ice and a cold sweat building on her face. Katsuki knelt down beside her and took her hands while the other 3 gathered around, concerned. Bakugu, what's happening? Did she get hurt? Did she overdo it with her quirk? Tenya asked urgently. Nah, this is just what happens in situations like this, Katsuki said bitterly, drawing characters on the palms of Izuka's hands with his finger. Ever since the kidnapping, if she ever got worked up without having a chance to mentally prepare herself, then when the situation was resolved, she'd go into a panic attack. It's sort of a side effect of her quirk. She generates a ton of adrenaline, and when she hasn't had a chance to mentally adjust herself, then this happens, he explained. He remembered the first time he'd seen this happen. He had been 10 and wanted to play a silly prank on Izuka and tried to scare her on Halloween, dressed as a shadow with a black sheet over his face and torches inside to act like eyes. Izuka had freaked out, thinking it was Kurogyri, and it had triggered a panic attack. Katsuki still hadn't forgiven himself for that F-up. He hadn't meant to look like the villain. He just thought a shadow was cooler than a ghost. He, in his childish mind, had thought Izuka would laugh at the prank. What do we do? Can we help? Momo asked. Katsuki gave a half-hearted smirk. You 3 are no use in this situation. Tell our shitty sensei that I'm looking out for Izuka. She needs fresh air and time, and she'll also need food, SCKS, but 9 times out of 10, when she gets herself worked up like this, she tends to puke, so we'll need to replace whatever she spews. A full stomach helps, trust me. Are you sure we shouldn't take her to Recovery Girl? Ochako asked. Nah, the old lady won't be any use here. Besides, she's going to be busy taking care of all the poor BSRDS that got trampled by the RETD train, the boy retorted, his respect for the youth student body having dropped to 0 following the incident. Tenya gave Katsuki a strange look. You really do take good care of her, don't you? Teaseth, stupid Deku is the kind of person who'll heal your paper cut even if she was 1 heal away from dying from BLD loss. I'm not effing idiot. I know I suck at taking care of people, so I let Izuka care for others while I care for her. Everyone gets what they need then. Get to class, 4 Eyes, or else that teacher of ours is going to be set at us, Katsuki said, easily lifting the still shaking Izuka into his arms. He carried her bridal style, her upper body pressed into his as he held her close. Tenya nodded and handed Katsuki a small wallet. If she needs more lunch, it's on me, he said simply, walking away before Katsuki could refuse it. Momo and Ochako both wished Izuka well and followed the boy, leaving just Katsuki and Izuka in the cafeteria. Katsuki eyed the wallet before sighing and shoving in his pocket. Izuka mumbled into his shoulder. Sorry Kaken. It's fine. You do the same for me, after all, he replied, heading for the gardens around the back of the school. And that's what bothers me, he thought. Elsewhere, as Tenya, Momo and Ochako were heading to class, they were suddenly stopped by another student, a girl from class 1B with long dark green hair. Hey, you're classmates with Midoriya, right? Yes we are. Can we help you? Ida asked. Yeah, I've been looking for Midoriya since this morning, but the press made me late for class, and then the alert happened at lunch. I was asked to pass along a letter for her from her older brother, the girl explained, handing a simple envelope to Ida. Could you give it to her for me? Momo frowned. Izuka told me she was an only child. Tenya regarded the letter suspiciously. Excuse me, miss? Oh, I'm Setsuna Tokage, the girl grinned. Tokage, can you describe the person who gave you this? Tokage shrugged. Not really. He was wearing a hoodie, but he seemed angry and had a creepy grin. Plus, his hands kept twitching. That sounds kind of like Bakugu. Ochako whispered. But why would Bakugo call himself her brother? And why a letter? He doesn't seem the type to do love letters. If he wanted to say something to Izuka, he'd just say it. Momo countered. Well, whatever, I just got asked to deliver the letter, but you guys are in her class so you can do it. See ya, Tokage said, heading off to her own class. The 3 Class 1A students gathered around the letter. It was in a plain white envelope and the name Little Bird was scrawled across the front in messy handwriting. What should we do? Chako asked. She didn't think it was safe to give the mystery letter to Izuka. Reading it ourselves would be a breach of privacy, if it really is a genuine letter to Izuka, but if it's something nefarious? Momo replied. Tenya nodded, we cannot read it. Let's give it to Aizawa-sensei, he decided. Heading to class, they found everyone gathered, finishing their lunch. Aizawa was grumpily informing them that the police had skirted the press out of the school and that hero lessons for the day would be cancelled due to the need to repair the damage to the barrier that the intruders had caused. Tenya asked the man for a private word and explained what happened with Izuka, as well as the strange letter. Aizawa took the letter and opened it without hesitation, reading it carefully. As his eyes darkened, the 3 teens were certain they'd made the right choice. Good work, you 3, he said simply, tucking the letter into his scarves. Now I'm going to go check on Midoriya. Please don't tell her or anyone else about that letter, he said, speaking kindly but with a hint of steel. Sir, what was in the letter? Ochako asked, unable to contain her curiosity. An ill-natured prank, not something she needed to deal with after a panic attack. Put it out of your minds, Aizawa ordered. Tenya, Ochako and Momo exchanged concerned looks, but ultimately agreed not to mention it again and headed back into the classroom to await the end of the lunch party. Instead of going to check on Izuka, Aizawa went immediately to the principal's office, where Nizu was looking annoyed by the damage to the barrier. Nizu, remember your theory that the destroyed barrier was a declaration of war? Nizu frowned. I do. It looks like you were right, Aizawa said, slapping the letter onto the principal's desk. Nizu leaned forward and read it, eyes narrowing as he did. Dear little bird. It has been so dull these past 5 years. I miss our little games. I saw you today walking to school. You've gotten so big, you'd never fit in your old cage. But that's all right, we've got a new one. Kurogyri and I forgive you for breaking out of the old one. We'll have to punish you, but then it'll all be over and we can be a little family again. We know those horrid heroes have been filling your little head with lies, but if you go to your old apartment tonight at midnight, we'll take you home and fix you. But if you tell the heroes about this little letter or refuse to come, we'll need to kill those heroes to prove we're better. Come home soon. Love, big brother Tamir. P.S. Kurogyri says hi. Also, we heard how you beat up Muscular. We hated that idiot, so we'll definitely lessen your punishment. He's a psychopath. Nizu growled. If Izuka had seen this, the self-sacrificing idiot might have obeyed. Aizawa finished the principal's sentence. Nizu sighed, rubbing his paws over his face. This letter arriving today can't be a coincidence. Shigaraki must be behind the destroyed barrier. His quirk matches the damage. Shota, go see to your class. I'm going to inform All Might. We can't allow Izuka out of our sight from now on. All trips outside of the main school building, regardless of class, will require a minimum of 3 heroes as guards. Shota nodded and began to leave, stopping at the door as Nizu called to him. Guard Izuka closely. If we lose her, the enemy will never let us get close again, and the next time we see her, she may have been broken and forced to submit to their will. The homeroom teacher shuddered at the very thought. Not only would it be beyond horrible to lose a student in such a way, if Izuka really was broken by Shigaraki and Kurogyri, it would lead to an immortal villain with the combined abilities of All Might, Endeavor and Recovery Girl. The heroes wouldn't stand a chance. Aizawa privately swore to protect the girl with his life. After all, being captured would be a fate worse than death for her. As the scruffy man returned to his class, he found Katsuki and Izuka walking back as well. The boy looked irritated and the girl looked nervous. Are you all right? Aizawa asked, looking at Izuka. Yes, sir. I'm sorry if I worried you, she said quietly. Don't apologize. It's my job to be worried, the man said dismissively. Hero classes are cancelled because of the press. We'll just be having independent study instead, so you can go home if you aren't feeling up to it. Thank you, Aizawa-sensei, but I'd like to stay. I have some things to say to everyone. Izuka smiled, putting on a brave face. Aizawa noticed Katsuki gently take her hand. At least the silly girl had someone who would always look out for her. That's fine, but tell me if you feel overwhelmed. I know how panic attacks feel and I know they suck. If you want to leave, then tell me, the man instructed her, before leading the two to the class. As soon as they entered, they were immediately surrounded by the rest of 1A, all worriedly asking if Izuka was all right. Izuka smiled at them and bowed. Thank you for worrying about me. I'm sorry for the trouble. It's cool, Midoriya. You, Bakugo and Ida got us out of a pretty tight jam back in the cafeteria, Kirishima said, patting the girl's shoulder. Are you feeling better now? You were pretty shaken, Ochako whispered, earning a friendly smile from the green-haired girl. I'm fine. If it's okay, I had some stuff to say before we elect the class representative, she said. The class nodded excitedly and returned to their seats while Izuka and Momo took their positions by Aizawa-sensei's desk. All right, President, start us off. Momo smiled. Okay. Before we finalize the president, vice president, and representative, I have a couple of important things to say. Firstly, Izuka gulped, I don't think I'm the right person to be president. I'm not confident enough. I panic when situations go out of control, and in the cafeteria, I lost my temper badly. I don't think that's the sort of leader we need. But still, I want to try my best and prove I deserve your trust, so I wanted to ask everyone if it's okay for me to swap positions with Momo. The class looked shocked. So you'd rather be vice president? Kyoka asked with a raised eyebrow. Izuka nodded. I think it would be better for everyone. This way, I can learn how to be a good leader by watching Momo, who has the confidence and cool temperament. I'm sorry if I disappointed any of the people who voted for me, but I really feel this would be best. Hey now, it was probably not fair of us to elect you when you didn't want it in the first place. I think we should go for it. Kaminari grinned. Yeah, we kind of dropped you in it. Sato rubbed his neck guiltily. If you'd rather be vice president, then I'm cool with it. The rest of the class nodded and shouted their agreements, so Izuka happily stepped down to the rank of vice president and Momo graciously stepped up. Thank you for trusting me so much, Izuka. Momo smiled before turning to the class. I know not everyone voted for me, but I'll do my best to meet all your expectations and of course. Momo put her arm around Izuka's shoulders and squeezed her gently. I'll be working closely with Izuka, so it'll be the best of both worlds. Leave it to us. We'll make sure the class succeeds. Momo's words were met with a round of cheers, and when it died down, Izuka stepped forward again. On the topic of the student government, I wanted to nominate Tenya Ida as our representative. Me? Tenya spluttered, a mix of surprise and joy on his features. Yeah. Of the three people who reacted in the cafeteria earlier, Kakin and I got angry and might have scared others, but Tenya stayed cool and collected, easing everyone's worries. He is the positive image that the other students will think of when they think of Class 1A. Izuka explained. She's got a good point. Ida really helped out in the lunchroom. Kirishima grinned. Yeah, he was like one of those signs. Emergency exit Ida for class representative. Kaminari cheered. Ida stood up. If that is the wish of the class and vice president, then I cannot refuse. I graciously accept the position of representative, he said proudly. The class cheered again, and the rest of the day passed into an easygoing study session with numerous students coming to the class council trio to offer their suggestions or tell them about problems. The three were looking forward to the first full meeting of the student government. But as the day ended and the students headed home, Izuka couldn't help but wonder how the press had broken in the first place. If she had known, she might have been prepared for the nightmare that followed. Sometimes, Shota Aizawa really hated his life. The press invading the school yesterday had been a major annoyance, but still just an annoyance. The injuries caused by the panicking students, and the resultant panic attack from Izuka had sullied his mood further, but Aizawa had dealt with worse. Discovering the press had gotten in through a hole in the barrier that was created by one of the people responsible for Izuka's captivity 5 years ago, as well as discovering a threatening letter from that person to Izuka, had left Aizawa wanting to crawl into his sleeping bag, grab his cats and hide from the world. Then to put a cap on a truly god-awful day, he had to tell All Might about Izuka's panic attack and the letter. The number one hero had, quite reasonably, gone ballistic and had only barely been able to keep his rage from showing in front of Izuka and Katsuki. All that was yesterday, and it seemed to Aizawa that today was just going to keep shoveling more shit onto him. It was nearly 1 p.m., the time for hero foundational skills, which All Might was supposed to be teaching alongside Aizawa and 13 at the USJ, but at 2 a.m. that morning, a massive fire had destroyed an apartment building in Titun Ward, specifically, the building that Izuka and her mother had lived in before moving in with All Might, and the place that Shigaraki had stated as the meeting place in his letter to Izuka. The police and a few heroes, including All Might, had secretly staked the place out, but the villains never appeared. Suddenly, at 2 a.m., warp gates began opening throughout the building, dropping small explosives and Molotovs into every apartment and stairwell. All Might had been able to save the civilians living in the building with only a couple being injured, but the building had ultimately succumbed to the damage and collapsed, thankfully while it was empty. Even now, many hours later, All Might was still going over the place with a fine-tooth comb for any leads, and so he wasn't coming to you at A for the day. To compound the issue, almost no heroes were available to cover for All Might. All the ones that were available had already been roped into the other classes. In the end, even Gran Torino and Sir Night Eye were unavailable, both of them currently being out of the city following leads on alleged sightings of Kurogiri. The only person that Aizawa was able to get to assist him was a sidekick of Sir Night Eye, Juso Moshi, aka Centipeder. With the afternoon homeroom coming to an end, Aizawa-sensei stepped up to address the class. Today, your foundation skills class was intended to be supervised by a 3-man team of myself, All Might and another hero you'll meet shortly. Due to All Might being called away to assist the police, a sidekick from the Sir Night Eye agency, Centipeder will be joining us instead. Izuka smiled at that. She'd only met Centipeder a couple of times, but she liked him a lot. He was very respectful of others and acted like a gentleman. Siro put his hand up to ask a question. Sensei, what are we doing in class? The second most common form of hero work, after support, is rescue. Whether it's a natural disaster like a flood or hurricane, or a man-made disaster like car accidents and forest fires, a hero must always be ready to save others, so today is the trial of rescue. Aizawa declared. Whoa, this sounds tougher than the battle trial, Kaminari said, smirking despite his nervousness. Yeah, but it should be interesting, Mina said excitedly. Hell yeah. This is the whole point of heroes. I'm raring to go. Kirishima cheered. Tsuyu added her own comment. If it's a flood, then I'm in my environment. Aizawa just sighed. His students were so loud, but he liked their enthusiasm. Don't get ahead of yourselves, he said menacingly, shutting everyone up. Anyway, unlike the battle trial, you've got a choice of whether or not to wear your hero gear. I recommend you do though. Some of your gear won't be suited for rescue work, so it's better you discover how to improve them in training than in a real rescue situation. The training facility we're using is right on the edge of the school premises, so we'll be taking a short bus ride. Go get ready and meet out front. Izuka excitedly ran and grabbed her costume. Rescue was what she wanted to excel at most. It was the very thing that inspired her to be a hero. Her favorite videos, right from her earliest memories, hadn't been of All Might's numerous epic fights, but of him rescuing people with a smile. Restoring hope to the hopeless and saving lives, making the world a better and happier place with his every action. That was the kind of hero Izuka wanted to be. If today was the trial of rescue, then Izuka was determined to rise to the top, learning everything she could and proving she can be relied on. The girl practically flew to the changing rooms to prepare and was among the first students dressed and waiting outside. Momo followed soon after and the two girls stood by the bus, waiting for the rest of the class to appear. Once everyone had arrived, Ida approached the two. I recommend you have everyone line up into 2 lines to most efficiently and smoothly board the bus. Momo smiled kindly. Thank you for the recommendation, Ida, but I already checked out the bus. It's open seating. Everyone, please board the bus calmly and fill in seats at the back first. No fussing over seats or making swaps once you're seated, So stand by your friends if you want to be sat together. Izuka giggled. Momo reminded her of a mix between a mother and an elementary school teacher. The class obeyed, some smirking and some a bit annoyed by being ordered around, mostly just Katsuki. It wasn't long before everyone was boarded and they were on their way. It was a couple of minutes into the ride that Tsuyu, who had sat opposite Izuka, looked to the girl. "Hey Izuka, you know I like to say what's on my mind." "Yeah, I remember." "What's up?" Izuka asked. "Your quirk is strange. It reminds me of Endeavor in appearance, but it feels more like All Might's," Tsuyu said casually. Izuka squeaked in surprise and Katsuki raised an eyebrow at the frog girl. Tsuyu was more observant than he gave her credit for. I guess it's a bit like theirs, since I can control fire and enhance my strength, but to be honest, I think my healing and flying are the best parts of my quirk." "She isn't much like Endeavor at all," Todoroki said, his cold voice floating in from the back of the bus. "Endeavor is immune to his own flames, but he can still be hurt by other flames. Midoriya's flames could burn him, but his couldn't burn her. That's so cool. I'm kind of jealous of flashy quirks like that. My hardening quirk is good for fighting but not much else," Kirishima said with a half-hearted smirk. "I think it's a great quirk." Izuka smiled. "A quirk like that is amazing for a hero whose whole job is saving others." "You'll be an amazing hero, Kirishima." The redhead grinned, showing off his shark-like teeth. "Thanks. Hey, call me Aijiro or just Eiji if you want. We're buds, right?" Izuka beamed at him. "Sure. And you can call me Izuka?" Katsuki growled. "Hands off my girl, shitty hair." Izuka blushed, earning a few giggles from the other girls while Kirishima just laughed. "Nah bro, we're cool. Flirting with another person's guy or girl is super unmanly. Izuka is just like a little bro." "She's a girl." Kyoka deadpanned. "A little sis then," Kirishima shot back. Katsuki just poked Izuka's cheek. "You need to stop collecting weird but pseudo-siblings. Ponytail and glasses are one thing, but shitty hair is going too far," he joked. "Didn't you hear, Bakugu? We're making a club, the Midoriya Protection Squad." Momo laughed. Tsuyu giggled, sounding a bit like croaking. "An interesting idea. Hey Izuka, my quirk makes me useful in flooded or watery areas and yours makes you immune to fire. Plus, I can swim very well while you can fly. We should make a team together after we graduate." Izuka smiled and was about to reply when Katsuki turned his fiery eyes on the two girls. "Hey Froggy, Izuka is forming an agency with me. You want in? You've got to prove you're a badass. Then I'll hire you as a sidekick." Tsuyu fixed him with one of her blank, unreadable looks. "You'll need Izuka to get you business and sidekicks. Your personality is too rough to be really popular." "The F did you say?" the boy growled. "See?" Tsuyu said, poking her tongue out with a look of vindication. Momo's sweat dropped. "I was joking about the club, but it looks like Bakugu has already founded it." Ochako laughed. "Maybe we should make it official after all?" Aizawa just stared at the class with angry eyes. "Settle down, we're almost there." "Yes, sir." It was another few minutes, but finally, the bus pulled up outside a massive dome complex. It was monstrously huge, resembling a closed-roof Olympic arena. When the class was led inside, they couldn't help but gape at the amazing scale of the building and what had been built inside. The inside actually sunk several feet below ground, with a long stairway acting as the only way from the entrance to the floor of the facility. A walkway went around the entire outer rim of the building, on the same level as the outside ground, acting as a way of observing the students in the areas beneath. In the center of the facility was a fountain and 7 paths led from it, one leading to the entrance stairway and the other 6 leading to the smaller facilities. A small ruined city, a massive mound of yellow dirt that had buried a settlement, a small mountain range, a dome with red flames on the roof, a massive pool and another dome, this one with blue clouds were the 6 facilities. Arranged around the central fountain like spokes on a wheel. Amazing! This looks like Universal Studios or something. The class were looking around excitedly as 2 heroes approached, the first being a short person in a space suit and the other being a tall man in a black tuxedo with a centipede for a head, part of which was wrapped around to look like a centipede-themed scarf. The hero in the spacesuit began to speak. "I created this area as a practical training area Floods, landslides, fires, tsunamis. This place was built to simulate them all and teach young heroes how to act. It's the unforeseen situations joint. Theme. It's 13, the space hero. Izuka cheered, and that's Centipeter, a sidekick of Sir Knight. Even though he's a sidekick, he's got the record for the most rescues of all sidekicks in the region, even more than some independent heroes and those with their own agencies. Of all the sidekicks, he's the closest to going independent. I love 13, Kako squealed. Dude, Centipeter is freaking cool. Kaminari grinned, looking almost excited as Ochako and Izuka. Centipeter made a chittering sound that was reminiscent of laughter. Thank you for your introduction, Izuka. Sir Knight I asked me to pass along that he'd like you to come by the agency when he gets back. He supposedly found a rare piece of All Might merchandise, the hero said, making the centipede equivalent of a smile. 13 shuffled over to the stairs to begin the lesson. Before we begin, I need to say a thing or two, or maybe 3, perhaps 4. 13? Centipeter nudged the space hero. Oh right, sorry. I'm sure many of you know this already, but my quirk is called Black Hole. It allows me to create a powerful vortex at the tips of my fingers. The vortex will SCK in pretty much anything, but whatever does get SCKD in is reduced to dust. 13 explained, lifting their hand to show the caps on their fingers. It's a great quirk for rescue. It can easily remove rubble and wreckage, as well as skin-trapped individuals towards you. Izuka said. Yes. 13 began, their voice becoming pensive, and yet it is also a quirk that can very easily kill people. That's not rare for a hero's quirk, and I'm sure many of you are the same. Izuka felt a horrible shudder go up her spine at a distant memory. She still remembered what it was like to watch Tamura decay a person in front of her eyes, and she still remembered how it felt to have her flames roar forth and consume all for one. She looked at her hands forlornly, the feeling of those long extinguished flames ghosting across her fingertips. Aizawa-sensei noticed with sad eyes, and Katsuki gently took her hand, earning a grateful smile from the girl. 13, having noticed the exchange but choosing not to comment, continued, quirks are an incredibly powerful, useful and dangerous factor of today's society. Among the people, they are carefully regulated to ensure they aren't used in a dangerous manner. As a society, we can't feel safe otherwise. After all, everyday children are born that have powers that could kill easily. Without control, our civilization could easily fall apart. 13 pointed towards Aizawa. With Aizawa-sensei, you learn the limits of your body's power when it comes to your quirks, and with All Might, you learned what it was like to fight against, and more importantly, defend against others that used their power with the intent of defeating you. With me, you will be learning how to use your amazing powers for the sake of saving lives. I truly believe in my heart that our quirks do not exist to hurt one another. I hope that by the end of this lesson, you will all truly understand that heroes and their powers exist solely to help others. 13 did a little bow. That is all. Thank you for listening so patiently. It was awesome. Ochako cheered while Ida was repeatedly shouting bravo and clapping profusely. Aizawa began to turn to the class when he caught something out of the corner of his eye. A strange swirl of black mist had formed in front of the fountain in the center of the UJ and was slowly growing larger. Then a pale hand appeared from it. The underground hero gasped and Izuka took notice, before turning as white as a sheet at the sight of the familiar face poking out of the equally familiar mist. No. It can't be, she shrieked, shaking like a leaf and almost hiding behind Katsuki and Kirishima, whom had stepped forward to see what was happening. The familiar face, or rather, familiar hair and eye exposed by a severed hand mask, was now a full figure, pale-skinned and dressed in black with severed hands absolutely covering his body. The form of Tamura Shigaraki stepped out of Kurogiri's warp gate, accompanied by a small army of villains. Huddle together and don't move, Aizawa shouted, surprising the students whom were still trying to work out why Izuka was panicking. Fiend. Protect the students? Kirishima frowned. What the hell? Who is that guy? Izuka, do you know them? Don't move, Aizawa roared, putting his signature goggles over his eyes. Those are villains. The students paled and gathered close together behind Centipeder, whom had turned his arms into massive centipedes in preparation for defending the students. Down by the fountain, the black mist shrunk down to roughly human size, with only a metal neck brace showing where his body ended and his head began. The villain, Kurogiri, spoke. Eraserhead, 13 and Centipeder? According to the curriculum sheet we obtained yesterday, the third teacher was supposed to be All Might, and yet he isn't here. Aizawa growled. So yesterday really was you, he snapped. Behind him, Izuka paled even further, her skin now almost gray from fear. She was barely breathing as her whole body rebelled, screaming at her to flee. She was no fool, they were here for her. Shigaraki stepped forward, his voice as creepy and unhinged as ever. Where is he? We went through all this trouble to pick a time when they were both here. We gathered up so many party members, and the demon boss doesn't even show up. He turned his eyes towards Izuka, just barely visible between her friends. Still, we got the main prize. He leered up at her. Nice to see you again, little bird. Izuka shuddered violently and Katsuki shoved her behind him, ready to detonate the first idiot that came to try and take her. Bibakugu, do these guys know Izuka? Ochako asked fearfully, trying to comfort the terrified girl. That Misty F is the one who kidnapped her, and the a-hole covered in hands used to torture her while she was held captive. Katsuki explained, growing angrier with every second. The black mist can create warp gates between two locations, but I have no idea of the limits. Handy F will start to decay anything that he touches with all 5 fingers on one hand. I think he can do it with his feet too now, 'cause of some F-ed-up experiment they did with Izuka. No way! These guys are some of All for One's villains? Kaminari exclaimed. Momo turned to 13. Sensei, are there intruder alarms here? She asked urgently. Of course, but something is jamming them. 13 said, slowly grouping the students together behind them. Todoroki frowned. Is this the only place they're attacking, or are they all over the campus? Regardless, if they're jamming the sensors, we're not getting any help until the person responsible is taken out. They chose an isolated place away from the main building, at a time when a class was scheduled. They must have an objective. We need to protect Izuka, Kyoka said with a growl. I heard every word that creepy guy said. They came to kill All Might and recapture Izuka. Since All Might isn't here, they'll take Izuka and run away. Aizawa looked down at the villains coldly. 13, begin the evacuation procedure and try contacting the school. If they've gotten around our sensors, it means they either have an amazing hacker or someone with an electronic disruption quirk, so we need to move beyond that person's range. Kaminari, try using your own quirk to reactivate one of the sensors or call for help, he ordered, preparing to fight. A loud slapping sound drew the attention of the whole class, with all of them turning to see Izuka standing, shakily, with a red handprint on her face. She'd slapped herself to shake some of the terror she felt and was now slowly getting control of herself. I'm fine. Sensei, you can't fight them all alone, even if you suppress all their quirks, there's just too many of them. Your fighting style doesn't suit this kind of situation, she argued, her speech a bit shaky as she continued to battle with her panic. Before Katsuki or any of the others could stop her, Izuka ducked under Centipeder's arms and ran to Aizawa, removing one of her gloves before taking Aizawa's hand. Aizawa felt the bizarre but comforting feeling of the link forming, and the moment it was finished, he tried the mental communication. Izuka? I'm here. I know you won't back down no matter how much I beg you, and you won't let me fight in case I expose my true quirk, so this is all I can do. I don't know how your quirk will be improved, or the limits of what I can do with your quirk, but with this, I can fly around and erase quirks while you fight. Izuka's voice sounded in her head. Aizawa-sensei so wanted to scold the girl, but he couldn't bring himself to. She knew the horrors that these villains could unleash better than anyone. Finally, Izuka conjured some pink flames and forced them against Shota's eyes, making him wince at the pain, but healing his dry eye. Thank you, Izuka. Now follow my orders to the letter, get out of the building and fly around outside the dome. The ceiling is glass, so you'll be able to erase quirks by looking through it and it will provide you a shield. Yes, sensei. Izuka smiled and darted back to the class, whom had watched the apparently silent exchange with confusion. 13, I'm counting on you, Aizawa yelled. And you too, Izuka, he thought, before jumping down the stairs, goggles on and capture weapons at the ready. A group of villains with ranged quirks assembled at the bottom to unleash a barrage, but Aizawa unleashed his quirk, opting to test the empowered version for just this one erasure. The drain on his stamina was noticeable, and to his shame, it caused Aizawa to blink, internally cursing as the enemy launched their quirks. Nothing happened. What the foo dash? The villain's words were cut off as Aizawa wrapped them in his scarves and slammed them into each other and knocked them out. It seems the improved version of my quirk doesn't only last while I'm looking at them, it must shut off their quirks for a PRD of time, but how long? Aizawa thought, taking down a mutant-type villain that had thought he'd be able to work around Eraserhead's quirk. A short distance away, Tamura watched the fight with both amusement and irritation. Amazing hand-to-hand skills, plus his goggles make it impossible to see who he's looking at and thus whose quirk he's erasing. Pros really are a major pain. But it's the little bird that's really causing a problem. That horrid hero has trained her to link with him and support him. Who knows what his improved powers are? If we were anyone else, we'd be fodder. Meanwhile, 13 was beginning the evacuation and the whole class was heading to the entrance. 13 leading them and Centipeder holding up the rear. However, just as they were about to reach the gates leading out of the facility, Kurogyri suddenly appeared, covering the whole entrance in his shadowy mass. Down in the battle, Aizawa cursed, "Sheet. I hit him with the improved version, but it looks like it only lasts 45 seconds. Kurogyri loomed over the crowd, his yellow eyes narrowing on Izuka for a second. Greetings. We are the League of Villains. I apologize for the presumption, but we have taken it upon ourselves to enter you, the base of heroes, in order to reclaim our stolen asset, Izuka Midoriya, and engage in battle with All Might, the symbol of peace. It seems All Might isn't in attendance? Is he perhaps needed elsewhere?" The mist villain turned his attention fully on Izuka. "Phoenix, you have caused a fair bit of trouble. You are lucky we already knew of your weakness for heroes and their influence, or we would be much more angry. Why did you ignore our letter?" Because of that, Tamura destroyed that whole apartment building. Izuka froze. "A letter? What letter? What did you destroy?" Kurogyri tilted his head. "Ah, so you didn't receive it. A pity. If you had, we wouldn't have destroyed your childhood home or even invaded here today. I told Tamura he shouldn't have passed it along through a random student." Tenya, Ochako and Momo paled drastically. The letter they'd give to Aizawa had been from these guys? The villain merely shook his head with a sigh. "Well, that was a waste then. But this can still end well, Phoenix. Surrender to me, take your deserved punishment for your rebellion and come home. If you do, the rest of these heroes will be spared. If not, we will ensure they all die screaming." Izuka's eyes widened. That wasn't an idle threat. Kurogyri wasn't SDST like Tamura, but if he wanted to, he could kill just as painfully by closing his warp gates on a person's body, slicing them apart. She needed to think of a plan. Under no circumstances was Izuka willing to just go back to that hell, but she needed to be smart and figure out a way to fight back without risking the lives of her friends. With a sigh, Izuka focused on the link she had once formed with Mandalay of the Pussycats, reopening it to allow the use of her quirk. "Izuka? Kitten, this is a surprise. Why the sudden link?" Mandalay asked over the link. "Mandalay, this is important. I need to borrow your quirk. My class and I are currently besieged by villains led by All for One's men. We're trapped in the USJ. Please gather any heroes you can and get to you today. I'm gonna contact Recovery Girl too and get her help to get the closer heroes to help them in. I'll get there as soon as I can. Stay strong, kiddo, and keep the link open no matter what," Mandalay ordered. Izuka sent an affirmative and immediately opened the link with Recovery Girl, passing along the same message to her. "Izuka, I'll assemble the teachers and call All Might, but all-out electrical and communication systems have been malfunctioning, so it may take some time for me to run around and gather them manually. Hold out for as long as you can, help is coming," Recovery Girl said, already running to find Nizu. The green-haired girl gulped. This would be the tricky part. She was currently already linked with 3 people, and from what she remembered from All for One's tests, 5 was the most she could link with safely. She was about to link with 21 more. Tapping into Mandalay's quirk through the link, Izuka activated telepathy, speaking with 13, Centipeder, and every member of her class. Everyone, this is Izuka. I know this is strange, but I'm talking to you telepathically. This is a feature of another quirk I have called Link Evolution. It allows me to form spiritual links with anyone I have skin contact with. While linked, I can use the quirks of those linked to me, and everyone linked has their own quirks permanently increased to be more powerful. You'll be able to use the normal versions separately, and the stronger versions will use up a lot of stamina. Plus, as long as we're linked, we can talk telepathically. The quirk I'm using now is borrowed, so it's only one way for me. Izuka explained, trying to explain as quickly as possible before Kurogyari got suspicious. I've already used this quirk to contact Recovery Girl, so reinforcements are on their way, but it'll take some time. Whatever the villains did to the sensors is also affecting communication across the school. Behind her, Izuka could feel the rest of her classmates relaxing a bit. Now please do as I say. Expose your right hand, I need bare skin for the link. Please do it subtly, or Kurogyari will know what we're up to. There was some quiet shuffling behind her as each student removed a glove or pulled up a sleeve. Kurogyari, having grown impatient, stepped forward and began to expand again. It seems you have no intention of surrendering. In that case, this is my role. At that moment, Kirishima and Katsuki both ran past Izuka, holding their bare hands up. Izuka slapped her palms against theirs, forming the links as the two launched an attack at Kurogyari, momentarily dispersing his mist body. In the chaos that caused, Izuka was able to quickly run and link up with the rest of the students and Centipeder, but before she could link with 13, Kurogyari reformed. So that was your plan. Did you all know that if more than 5 people link with Phoenix, her body begins to suffer immense stress? You may all be the hero world's golden eggs, but that girl is a phoenix compared to you chickens. Kurogyari's body expanded, surrounding them all. You will be scattered, and tortured, and slain, he declared as the class was absorbed into his warp gates. Shoji was able to grab Hagakure and Aoyama before leaping away from the gates, while Ida was able to stop Sato and Uraraka from being taken, leaving the 6 of them and the 2 pros left at the entrance while the others were all scattered. With his warp gates closed, Kurogyari's eyes narrowed in displeasure. At the last moment, the gate he'd opened to their base had been avoided as Phoenix grabbed hold of the pink-haired girl with horns. Still, it had no bearing on the situation, for despite his words, Kurogyari knew that all the villains had strict orders to capture, not kill any of the heroes or students. After all, without them, they'd have no way of forcing Phoenix's compliance. Elsewhere, Izuka and Mina appeared from the warp gate they'd been seeking into and found themselves falling down to the yellow dirt and sand of the landslide zone. Thinking fast, Izuka summoned her wings and grabbed Mina, landing softly on the landslide zone. Whoa! That would have been a nasty fall. Thanks, Izuka, Mina said gratefully, breathing to catch her breath. It's fine. Catch your breath while I contact everyone, Izuka said, focusing on the links she'd made. The girl was being careful not to show it in front of Mina, but her body felt like it was on the verge of falling apart. Everything hurt from the immense strain of what was essentially 23 links. Each link beyond the initial 5 would double the strain on her body, so it was only sheer willpower and the strength of one for all that was keeping Izuka standing and not screaming in pain. Focusing on the links, she opened the mental communication with everyone. Everyone. This is Izuka. Please respond and tell me where you are. This is Tsuyu. Mineta and I are in the flood zone. We're safe on the boat, but the water is full of villains. We should be safe until help arrives. Tsuyu responded. Izuka. Minute, don't do anything fighting. The links will tear you up. Katsuki yelled, I'm here with Tail Dude and the Animal Whisperer. I think it's the ruins zone. Stay put. I'm coming to you. We're wet in the downpour zone, but otherwise fine. Tokoyami and Siro are with me. There are villains, but we're holding our own. They don't seem that eager to kill us. Kyoka answered. Izuka, this is Momo. I'm in the conflagration zone with Todoroki and Kirishima. We're doing fine, So please don't strain yourself, came Momo's answer. Oh. Midoriya, this is Kaminari. I'm just down the hill from you. I'm coming up. Izuka looked down the hill and spotted Kaminari working his way up, carefully climbing the shifting dirt and sand. All the other students are here at the entrance with 13 and I. Centipeder replied. Izuka sighed with relief. That meant everyone was still on site. There was still hope that this situation would end without casualties. Okay everyone. Help is coming, so find a defensible position and hold up. If any of you end up in a situation where you have no choice but to fight, then use the empowered versions of your quirks sparingly. Report any injuries to me as well. I'm linked with Recovery Girl right now, so I can use her quirk to assist my own in healing. Kaminari finally reached the top of the hill and stood beside Mina and Izuka. Midoriya, no offense, but why the hell are you still here? Use some fire and those wings to blast your way out of here. They're here for you after all, and if you stay, they might be able to capture you. Izuka shook her head. If I leave, Tamura, the guy with the hands, will slaughter you all. His quirk would bust through any defense, and even if I flew away, Kurogiri would be able to catch me too fast. It's safer for everyone if I stay and help, she argued. Secretly though, despite the fact she'd never run, Izuka doubted she even could now. Her powers had been weakened so much by the number of links that she doubted she could fly more than a few feet or summon up any sort of flame that could bust through the reinforced glass that made up the USJ ceiling. For now, Izuka would have to hope the heroes arrived in time. For several minutes, Izuka listened with growing trepidation as she could do nothing but ignore her aching body and watch the battles happening around the UV. 13, the only person she hadn't been able to link to, had been seriously wounded by Kurogiri redirecting their own black hole quirk back on them. Most of the other battles were going better. Todoroki, Tokoyami and Bakugo were easily blasting through the enemy with some support from their fellow classmates. The entire conflagration zone had been frozen solid, leaving not a single flame throughout the place. Todoroki stood in the center with a frown. These flames aren't even close to the level of Midoriya or that BSRD, he said simply as Yaoyorozu looked at him questioningly. Even at the landslide zone, Kaminari and Ashido were doing well defending Izuka from the few villains around. They'd come across a villain whose body was made of sludge, but Kaminari had easily electrocuted him into unconsciousness. Izuka's link evolution had provided both Kaminari and Mina with permanent strength boosts. Kaminari's nervous system had become somewhat insulated from outside electricity, allowing him to use his quirk a lot more before becoming shorted out, tripling the amount of electricity he could safely use. Mina's skin had also gained a special membrane between the surface and the glands that secrete acid, making her fully immune to her own acid, so no matter how much she used, she wouldn't damage herself. Oddly, Mina was also able to temporarily harden her horns, turning them from rubbery to solid for a few seconds. Both marveled at their new power and were eager to use it, even though they'd yet to actually try the empowered forms, instead only testing their own improved limits. Everything seemed to be going fairly well, until Izuka received a panicked message from Mineta. Midoriya, the villains surrounding us are attacking the boat we're on. If they sink it, Azui and I are chummed. Darn it. I'm on my way. Izuka replied, summoning her wings. Just the effort of that caused her to stumble and fall to one knee. But she couldn't give up. Tiu and Mineta needed her. She had to go beyond her own limits. P plus Ultra, she roared, blasting herself into the air and flying as fast as she could to the flood zone. Just as she arrived above the flood zone, one of the villains blasted the ship with a massive water attack, smashing it in half and causing it to sink. Tiu, grab Mineta and jump as high as you can, Izuka ordered, channeling Kaminari's quirk into her arms. Tiu wrapped the panicking Mineta in her tongue and leapt high, easily jumping a few dozen feet above the water. At the moment Tsuyu was off the ground, Izuka focused Kaminari's quirk into her fiery feathers, transforming her phoenix feather move into a whole new technique. Take this. Thunderbird feathers, she cried, shooting the lightning feathers into the water around the villains. The electricity exploded outward, arcing through the water and zapping every villain inside it, leaving them unconscious and lightly smoking. Tsuyu landed in the water just as the last of the electricity was gone, leaving her and Mineta safe. Unfortunately, the effort of the attack left Izuka even more drained and her mind felt foggy from all the electricity she used. With a faint crackle and pop, her wings fizzled out, leaving the girl to fall to the water below. Tsuyu shot her tongue out and caught the girl, helping reduce Izuka's impact with the water. Thanks. Izuka spluttered as she resurfaced. You're welcome. You saved Mineta and I after all. Tsuyu smiled, swimming to the edge of the flood zone, right next to where Aizawa was still fighting the villains. To Izuka's horror, while Aizawa had cleared out most of the small fry villains, he was now locked in a fight with Tamura himself, whom was counting down the seconds until his quirk returned following Aizawa erasing it. You're really amazing, Eraserhead, but I've worked it out. With the little bird having evolved your quirk, it takes 45 seconds before our quirks return if you use the powered-up version of your erasure. Not only that, but after every action you take, your hair falls back in front of your eyes, and the interval is getting shorter. Tamura cackled, blocking Aizawa's elbow strike with his palm. You relied too much on the little bird's power boost, and now you're running on fumes. Tamura's quirk activated, slowly decaying the clothes, then skin of Aizawa's elbow. With a strong punch to the villain's face, Eraserhead managed to dodge back, taking out a couple of lesser villains as he went. Tamura got back to his feet with a creepy smirk. No matter how you slice it, you aren't suited for long fights. Your style is taking out a group with sneak attacks, and because you abused your evolved quirk too much, you're even more exhausted than normal. So why'd you jump in like that? To give your students some peace of mind? To make them believe in you? To show the little bird that you heroes are the ones in the right? A shadow loomed over Aizawa and he turned to see a massive creature with rippling muscles, pitch-black skin, a bird-like beak and an exposed brain, one of the Numis. You're pretty cool, Eraserhead, but when we kill you and All Might, the little bird will see that we are the right ones. But you wasted time fighting me. I'm not the trump card. Tamura grinned as Numu attacked the pro. Izuka watched in horror as Aizawa was left broken and bleeding on the ground, his injured arm even further mangled. It had all happened so fast. 1 second, the Numu was beside Tamura and the next, Aizawa was beaten beneath the beast's fists. Tamura regarded the fallen pro like a child staring at an insect with a broken wing. You can erase quirks, a great ability, but in the end you can't do anything against overwhelming strength. This Numu was created to be able to stand toe-to-toe with All Might. From the very beginning, none of you had a chance. Numu raised its fist again and this time, he slammed it down on Aizawa's other arm, crushing it and causing Aizawa to scream out in pain. Aizawa breathed and wheezed through broken ribs, and he snapped me like a twig. My quirk isn't affecting him at all. Is this strength not from a quirk? Over at the water's edge, Izuka, Tsuyu and Mineta were covering their mouths in a desperate attempt not to scream or cry out to their battered sensei. Midoriya, can you do anything against that guy? Mineta asked fearfully. He was shaking and crying, and Tsuyu was only a step behind. Izuka grimaced, tears pouring down her face from both the pain of the lynx and the misery she felt at being helpless. She couldn't muster any power and she was too scared to break the lynx, in case one of the others needed help. But even at full power, would she even be able to match a Numu design to fight evenly with All Might? Kurogiri suddenly appeared beside Tamura. Tamura, things are going as planned. Tamura looked towards him. Kurogiri, are 13 and Centipeder dead? 13 is crippled. I left Centipeder and the remaining students at the gate. One of them had a laser quirk that was powered up by Phoenix. In his panic, he shot the powerful version and blasted the door, melting it into slag. It won't open now without great force and none of the students there can get through. As a bonus, the boy drained himself too much and passed out from fatigue. It will only take a few more minutes and we can finish our operation, the mist villain reported. Tamura chuckled, excellent, now let's get started with the final phase. Oh no? They're nearly done? Does that mean the others? Mineta squealed, his voice only barely muffled by Tsuyu quickly dunking his head underwater. This is unnerving. Izuka, can you contact the others? Tsuyu asked. Izuka nodded and began checking each of her links. Aizawa's was fluttering in and out as he struggled to maintain consciousness. Mandalay and Recovery Girl were both working quickly to get back up, both assuring Izuka that it would only be another 10 or 15 minutes and that they needed to hold out a little longer. More worryingly, several of her classmates had fuzzy signals, like they'd be knocked unconscious, and the few that she could speak to were panicked and running low on energy. Diamenit. Help is still 15 minutes away and everyone is on their last legs. Everyone, please hold out a little longer. Another villain, a strange skeletal man with what looked like radio parts stuck into him, came running over to Tamura. Boss, I've gotten into the PA system. Just talk into this and the whole USJ will hear you, the villain said, handing Tamura a small receiver from a ham radio. Good work. Now the stage is set, we just need out audience. And what better way of calling them than with a scream from our leading lady? Tamura suddenly turned towards Izuka, his eyes locking on hers. Before Izuka could even react, Numu moved and suddenly, Izuka was left standing on the shore of the flood zone, facing Tamura, Kurogyri and Numu. The brain-dead beast had 1 foot pinning Aizawa-sensei to the ground and he was holding his hands out in front of them. In his left was Tsuyu and in his right was Mineta. Both were held by their heads and struggling to get free, but it was clear Numu had no intention of releasing them. One squeeze from Numu, and their heads would pop like balloons. Tamura smiled at Izuka. It was the closest to a normal, genuinely friendly smile that he had, and yet it still sent shivers up her spine. Little bird, there you are. I told you, didn't I? Heroes like this aren't worth supporting. They all follow scum like All Might and preach about saving others when they can't even save themselves. But forget all that for now. It's been 5 years and I've so longed to play one of our old games with you. And would you look at that, we have 2 players right here. He grinned, pointing to Tsuyu and Mineta. Here's the game, I'll name a body part and then you choose one of these 2 wannabe heroes, then I'll decay that person's body part. Tamura grinned. Izuka paled drastically. There was no way she could allow this to happen, but she didn't have the power to fight back against the enemy. She was left with only one option. Izuka prayed Aizawa-sensei would forgive her for this. Tamura, this is our game, not theirs. I should be a player, not them. Izuka said shakily, let them go and I'll take their place. I'll go back with you. Just please don't hurt them. The pale-haired villain watched her for a moment before nodding. Numu tossed Mineta aside and Izuka walked into his grip, though unlike with Mineta, the creature gripped her wrists, leaving her hanging by her arms a good few feet off the ground. With Izuka in Numu's grip, Tamura turned to Mineta. All right, little hero. The little bird took your place, so you take hers. I name the part, you name the person who gets to lose that part. Am I clear? He said threateningly. Mineta gulped, tears streaming down his face as he shook like a leaf. He barely worked up the courage to nod. Tamura sneered, let's start with an easy one, right toes? Mineta. Please, you need to pick me. Izuka yelled, no matter what part he names, you have to pick me. Izuka? Tsuyu yelled, disbelieving. No way. Midoriya, I can't. Mineta yelled. You have to. Please, I can take it. I survived a year with these guys, I can survive a lot more. Please Mineta.no, please Minoru. You need to choose me. Izuka screamed, desperately. Mineta's eyes widened. He had no choice. Izuka was being brave and sacrificing herself for their sake. He had to do what she said. I choose Izuka. Tamura grinned and moved over to Izuka, holding the radio receiver to her face. Nice and loudly now. Your audience is listening. He hooked the receiver to her shawl and knelt down, carefully removing her right boot before putting his fingers against her toes. And now the game begins. Shigaraki activated his quirk and in an instant, the toes of Izuka's right foot began to decay, turning into nothing but dust and bloody stumps. Izuka tried, she really did, but after only a few seconds, that horrendous, awful, familiar pain overtook her senses and she screamed. Her haunting screams echoed across the USJ, blasting out of the PA system of the facility and soon gave way to pained sobs as the poor girl tried to regain control of herself. Tamura smiled, a look of nostalgia in his eyes. Aizawa-sensei was struggling valiantly, as was Tsuyu, while Mineta had fallen to his knees, crying quiet apologies over and over. The villain stepped closer to Izuka to talk into the receiver. That, boys and girls, was little Izuka Midoriya having all the toes on her right foot decayed. If you don't want to hear me do the same to her little frog friend, then all of you better get over to the fountain. You have 5 minutes, he instructed. They didn't need 5 minutes. Before the 3rd minute ended, the entirety of Class 1A was in the plaza, their hands either in the air to signal surrender or bound by one of the villains. Each looked exhausted, wounded, and furious, but that was all replaced by horror as they saw Izuka, who really was missing the toes that Tamura had said he decayed. "You monster!" Centipeder shouted, running forward only to be stopped by Tamura putting his hands against both captive girls' throats. "Tut tut, any interference and I kill them both. Now, I made a little deal with my little bird to save that boy's life." Tamura pointed at Mineta. "She needs to finish the game before we continue. I think 3 rounds,